it hasn't happened for a long time now, but you always do have that specter of like the random bad Jared Goff game that shows up every now and again. We haven't seen one for a long time, but that doesn't mean we're not capable of getting a random Jared Goff stinker. And if we do get one, that makes it a lot easier for Washington to try and overcome that.
Put that up. You always got to put that out there. Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. You nailed it, man.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Lions fans, for putting that out into the ether. It was out there.
Why'd you have to do that?
It happened.
Why'd you have to do that? Why'd you have to mention a Jared Goff implosion? Maybe better in the divisional round than in the Super Bowl, though.
Sure.
Maybe not.
I mean, don't think you want that to be the way it happens. Whatever.
Happy divisional round review time. We're live on YouTube, as always, 7 a.m. Maybe our last 7 a.m. of the season. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens next week with Conference Championship Week.
Now, when we get our own studio, we can just do it at any time we want.
We could get
3 in the morning. Let's just turn it on. Let's go.
Soon.
We're live.
Soon.
Can't sleep? That's fine. Let's do a show.
Also, if you have studio space in Cincinnati, give us a call. We're on the search. We're on the prowl right now for the new studio.
Studio space, office space, a warehouse corner, whatever.
Yeah, anything. Just need a little bit of space. We got this. It's coming up soon, though. New studio, WIP, work in progress. We got 4 games to review. Should take 2 to 7 hours. We got this thing. It's all brought to you by PrizePicks. Good weekend for you.
Yeah, nailed it. 4 for 4.
Good lineup. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CheckTheMic. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. Divisional round, it was a good weekend, Sam. We had a lot of fun. Started Saturday. We'll go NFC, then AFC.
Okay.
That sound good? Let's talk about the game that you just talked about, that you may have predicted. Every now and again, we say something on the preview show, and we can point back to it and say, that's the thing that happened.
Every now and again, we're right.
Doesn't
happen often, but every now and again, we get something correct.
When you speak for 8 to 10 hours a week.
Right.
You stumble in.
Just by the rules of large numbers.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, you're going to say something, and it turns out right.
And we'll make sure that we highlight those things.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the Goff implosion. There's some nuance to that. There's some stuff that went down. But the Washington Commanders get the win, man. Big upset here, 45-31. It was a big upset on paper, but also impressive by the Commanders. They're playing really well right now. But this was the Lions' year, right? This was supposed to be their year. When we did the instant reaction the other day, we kind of split the review into 2. We talked a little Commanders, talked a little Lions. Let's discuss the game as a whole and make sure we give proper credit to the Commanders, and then console our Lions friends, because that is a tough pill to swallow. Home loss in the divisional round is the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah, I mean, from Washington's point of view, it's all good news for them. Jaden Daniels was, again, excellent. Their offense is cooking. They're able to put up points. They're able to keep drives alive. They stayed aggressive, like the Dan Quinn thing. Generally, he's been pretty aggressive, but I think he's kicking it up in the playoffs, understanding that if they go, however long they go for, they will be underdogs the entire journey, right? So in those scenarios, those are when you need to be aggressive, try and steal possessions, try and keep possessions alive by going for those 4th downs. And particularly, I think, when you're going up against the Lions team that's going to do it as well. So you kind of need to keep pace with that. They were able to keep doing that and having that success in offense. And then their defense, it's like, did they force the turnovers? Did the turnovers just come to them? That's always a kind of question. But the defense made a couple of plays. And, this team is now, it's able to work in a shootout. It's able to make some plays against one of the league's best defenses or one of the league's best offenses. They're in the NFC Championship game against a team that they've already beaten. Like, they're dangerous.
Started out innocently enough. Detroit up 7-3.
Innocently
enough, right? 7-3 after the first quarter, which included a failed 4th down early on.
Right, they lost the first one.
Right, ugly Marcus Mariota comes in. He was going to sneak it. They were going to fake the tush push. Whatever was going to happen there, it got stopped. So it's 7-3, and then an explosive second half. Right, it was 31-21 at the half for Washington, and how you got there was wild and all over the place. And as you mentioned, like I mentioned on the preview show, that you might have Washington's ability to have these long sustained drives could shorten the game. They did have some long sustained drives, and I think that helped in the second half. But that was anything but in the second quarter. It was back and forth, and every time you see this all the time. Every time the almost 10-digit, double-digit favorite starts to make a comeback, it's like, all right, of course, they're going to make the comeback. Right. They're a better team. And the underdog, you just have to keep, counter-punching and coming back and coming back. And once they got that pick six, right, it's 17-14, and Jared Goff overthrows to Quan Martin. Martin returns it for a 40-yard pick six. That was also when Jared Goff gets popped pretty hard by Frankie Louvu. That was when it was like, okay, Washington has a legit shot here. They're up 10 and, hitting Detroit in the mouth here, hitting hard. They were flying around making plays. And once they were up 10 there, it didn't mean the game was over. It was just like, okay, they do have a legit chance to pull this off. And that was, middle of the second, toward the end of the second quarter.
Yeah. There was a period in the game where it was like haymakers from both sides, right? There was big plays left and right, like Jared Goff. They get the kind of like Goff gets rocked, goes off the field for a couple of minutes. Teddy Bridgewater comes in. They run that reverse, and Jameson Williams houses it. They had been inches away. Like, they were kind of going back and forth for a period. I think generally for a big portion of the game, there was quite a lot of success on either side on offense, but Washington was getting the big plays. Like, they were getting the huge plays that were offsetting a lot of the kind of back and forth. They get the forced fumble on Jared Goff for the first turnover. Goff was just a hair off on a deep bomb to Jameson Williams as well. That would have been one of those haymakers that didn't quite come in. Then you get the pick six. They turn what could have been a touchdown before the half. Detroit was driving again, took a shot into the end zone. Mike Samerstill turns what would have been a touchdown into an interception. So Washington is getting all these sort of sequentially really important plays to preserve that lead and keep themselves, in a good position and stave off this Lions comeback that could have happened at any moment. Like Jameson Williams, if you hit on that bomb, that's a big step towards the comeback. If they get the touchdown instead of that Samerstill pick, that's a big step towards the comeback. Every sort of step of the way, Washington was just about able to head off this comeback and keep themselves preserved in the lead.
Yeah, it's true, man. Like the big plays that they were trading early in the game for the Lions, it was like, all right, this is what they do. Jahmyr Gibbs looked like the best player on the field. And that feels like it was a long time ago. Like by the time you got to the end of the game, you almost forgot it. He was rattling off 15 and 20-yard runs like crazy. He ends up with just 14 carries for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think the Lions, because of the game flow, got out of their flow, right, to be able to hand the ball off. And you could tell they wanted to give the ball to Gibbs a little bit more. David Montgomery was coming back from injury, but they were like, hey, no, we're not doing 50-50 split here. We want Gibbs and his big playability. That was working early. You mentioned the 61-yarder to Jameson Williams. You have Jared Goff going full Mahomes, falling over, making a touchdown pass. Now, it wasn't as accurate as Mahomes. Sam Laporta had to reel it in with a one-handed catch, but all the playmakers were making plays. Amon-Ra St. Brown ends up with 137 yards, right? Their playmakers were making plays, but I go back, like high level, I go back to week 2 when they lost to the Bucs, and it was all turnovers, right? Fumble luck, and they lost to the Bucs, and it's like if Goff implodes or if they turn the ball over, this offensive juggernaut all of a sudden not nearly as good. And then, to your point, Terry McLaurin, 58-yard screen pass, right? And just outrunning the defense, outflanks the defense. The bomb that Jaden Daniels throws to De'Ami Brown for 42 yards, where he's got his eyes covered, and it's just such a perfect pass by Jaden Daniels. Washington was able to go blow for blow with the explosiveness of Detroit while also forcing those turnovers and those game-changing plays defensively. And the Samerstill interception before the half, outstanding, right? It's a 10-point game. Detroit's in field goal range. So at worst, they could miss a field goal, but they're thinking at worst we're going to be down 7 at the half, right? As the favorites, they've handled the onslaught from Washington. But nope, Goff I thought Brady laid it out pretty well. He threw it kind of flat instead of leading him out. Samerstill undercuts it for the interception. Just outstanding play for Samerstill, who's had a great year as a rookie.
Yeah, it was a really nice play by him. He had a great game, made a couple of really important plays. We'll get to another one later on that Jameson Williams throw, the trick play that really dug them a hole. But the Goff replicating the Mahomes play thing, okay, it wasn't quite as accurate as Mahomes. It was, however, really impressive.
I'm joking, man. I wasn't taking anything away from Goff. That was a good play.
And that, like, early in the game, so one of the things that happened in this game, like, Washington's defensive line was getting pressure against one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Like, Detroit's offensive line had been so incredible all season long. This is one of the reasons why they've been able to overcome the weight of injuries that they've had overall and in particular on defense. The offensive line's amazing. The offense generally has been amazing, in part because of that platform. Washington's defensive line was able to cause problems for them, and they were getting to Jared Goff early in the game. Not the first time that's happened this season, but in other games it's happened. Goff has been insane under pressure. I mean, against the Vikings and Flores, they got pressure quite a lot, and Goff just went, doesn't matter. He's just going to deliver the ball anyway. He had the answers. And this was a play where, look, I think that was a design play to Dan Skipper again. Another, trick, red zone. Oh, look, an offensive lineman's involved. The pressure blew it up like really quickly. Goff had to get somewhere else and found Laporta in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. But that was a really impressive play under pressure by Jared Goff. Then you get this thing that happens every now and again where a quarterback takes some kind of hit and suddenly they're not quite the same player again. On that interception, that was the sort of first bad mistake that Goff made, first bad throw that Goff made, gets returned, and then on the way back, Luvu just absolutely buries Jared Goff. Now, hit to the head, should it have been flagged, should the touchdown have stood, all those kinds of things. Look, don't really care. It's just a missed call. It's going to happen. I don't think it would have materially changed the game. What might have materially changed the game is the actual hit to Goff's head and him either taking the hit to the face or then collapsing backwards onto the turf. All of his really terrible decisions happened after that point. Now, may have just been coincidence, right? Goff may have just started to dig himself a hole, kept digging, and that's how you get the bad Jared Goff game. It's also reasonable to at least wonder if Jared Goff's brain getting bounced around in his head on that hit altered his decision-making for the rest of that game. I don't know, but you can certainly say, look, that was one bad miss, which wasn't a bad decision. It was just he overthrew him, right? The bad decisions all came after that. And I don't know if that had an impact.
I mean, maybe. I don't know how much that affects. The Sandra still, so he got strip sacked early.
Yep.
He had the overthrow for an interception, which obviously happened before. The Sandra still one's just a miss.
Yeah.
It's not a bad decision. He kind of, I don't know. It wasn't like he was throwing picks left and right that were just awful decisions. He threw a pick.
No, but he did notably, the composure disappeared after that.
No, I agree. So I think maybe that hit affected it, but also just Washington was hitting hard overall, right? And look, they gave up 31 points against a very good offense. But Washington's defense, I thought, set a really good physical tone. Secondary, the linebackers up front, you met Jonathan Allen, Dorrance Armstrong. They have stitched together pretty effective pass rush, particularly in this game, as you mentioned. I think all of that had probably more of a factor. But that was almost – I'm glad Goff came back in so we didn't get this whole, hey, your season ended by bringing in, no offense to Teddy Bridgewater. The guy was coaching high school just about a month ago, right? I mean, he finished up his high school season, came out of retirement, and came in as the backup. Led the long touchdown drive, though.
Yeah.
Points per drive with Teddy, pretty solid.
I still feel like Hendon Hooker has the right to feel quite aggrieved by that. He's been the backup all season long. Teddy's busy coaching high school. And
obviously, they don't have much faith.
Oh, we need a quarterback for a couple of snaps while Jared's getting looked at. Sorry, Hendon. It's gonna be Teddy right off the couch.
Two things. So just to touch on this quickly, there's a lot of stuff that I want to make sure we don't forget here. The potential missed call on Jared Goff getting popped on the return.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, if it had happened.
I think it's a penalty. I think it's missed. But all it would have done is set them up in the red zone as opposed to giving them the points.
Yeah, it takes a touchdown off the board, but
they wouldn't have scored it. But the way that game was going, you would say they probably score anyway.
The bigger missed call, though, was the phantom face mask on David Montgomery. Because that was on 3rd and 2. He would have been stopped in his own territory. Probably would have been 4th and 2. Just an egregious missed call.
Well,
and
so
he
this
gets
is
grabbed by the shoulder pad.
Yeah, but this is one where this is why replay exists. Like, this was a call where actually live at full speed, it looked like a face mask. His head made this sort of weird motion that usually only happens when a guy gets grabbed by the face mask. But actually, when you saw the replay and you slow-moed it down, you're like, oh, look, he actually doesn't touch him anywhere near the face mask. It's all shoulder pad. It's not a horse collar. It's like that's actually a totally legal tackle. Like, it's one of the few instances where replay is actually there and suddenly it dispels everything that you thought you saw live, which is then the purpose of replay is to go, oh, look, we got this wrong, let's fix it. But it's one of those situations where because of the dumb rules with replay, we're not actually allowed to fix that one. Sorry, I know we're all looking at that right now live after the fact, 5 seconds after it happened, in plenty of time to change the play. But the rules say we can't actually touch that one. So we're just going to stare at it, know it's wrong, and be annoyed by it.
Didn't they tell us the opposite on the Sam Darnold night? When Sam Darnold has his face ripped off and they don't throw a flag, it's like, well, we can't just buzz in and just create a flag out of nowhere. But once a flag is thrown, we could buzz in, we could talk. Our friends from New York in the office who we know can say, hey, yeah, that's not a face mask. Yeah. It's not a face. I thought that was legal at this point. I thought people could buzz in.
There are certain things that they can fix. There are certain things that they're not allowed to fix, which is just, to me, if there are black and white, obvious, incorrect things that replay can see that you can fix before the next play has gone off, right? So, like, this idea of we got to hustle to the line so you can't challenge it, blah, blah, blah. If the dude in New York is sitting there watching this replay going, oh, look, that's wrong, and it's like way before the next play goes off, fix it. I don't care what the rule is. Fix it.
Honestly, there's enough things between the flop fest and some of the weird late hit calls and just the inconsistency there. That's my whole thing, right? And I think that's the fans' whole thing. Is you want to look at two different plays that look very similar and have similar results. And something like this, when it's clearly like face mask is binary, right? Yes or no. It's a binary call. You want to get there's some subjectivity to late hits and where the hit was and everything, and it's not as binary as face mask. Fix the face mask.
Nobody wants what happened a few years ago where we trialed, pass interference by committee, essentially. Like, do we debate this, review this? And it's like it's always a judgment call. This is not a judgment call. This is simple black and white. The replay showed us this was incorrect in plenty of time to just fix it. Fix it. It's obvious. It's wrong. That's why replay exists. Those are the words that everybody tries to put into replay rules in any sport you can think of, like obvious incorrect calls. That's what that was. We all saw that 5 seconds after it happened. Just change it. We goofed. Like, that's one where you could just empower the guy on the field to look at the replay and go, oh, whoever called that was wrong. Like, I understand why he called it. It's, that's not even one where you're like, oh, we got to punish the official for screwing that up. Like, on live viewing, I understand entirely why he thought that was a face mask, and I probably would have thought the same thing. But as soon as you saw the replay, it's like, it wasn't. We fix it, we move on. It shouldn't be a problem. Instead, it's like, no, hands are tied. Can't touch that. Sorry.
So that's obviously Washington already won this thing handily, and that missed call, probably stops the Lions' drive. Maybe they end up going for it, but probably stops their drive. Ends up becoming a touchdown drive. So from that perspective, maybe this was even worse. But and again, I'm very sensitive to fan bases here. So if I say, oh, let's talk about how the Lions beat themselves, that's not taking anything away from the Commanders. So let's just get that out there and make sure. But how did the Lions beat themselves? A couple things that came up here. 4th and goal from the 2, or 4th and 2, I should say, for Washington. 12 men on the field to get half the distance to the goal and a first down. It was a 3-point game at this point.
Yeah.
And so
this is huge.
12 men on the field for the Lions. And to Brady's credit, I saw the replay of this. I thought he was talking about the offense. I thought he was talking about because he was yelling, call timeout, call timeout.
No, it was, yeah.
I thought he was saying that because the offense was breaking the huddle late. No. I didn't realize he had it right. He said, there's 12 men on the field.
Yeah.
Like, dude, call a timeout.
Immediately.
It's early fourth quarter. You hate using second half timeouts, but this is an extremely high leverage play, obviously. And so they didn't call timeout. They get the 12 men penalty.
It's like Brady's career highlight as an announcer so far. Like,
it is. And I thought he missed it. I mean, I didn't think he missed it. I thought he was focused on the offense.
No.
The offense almost didn't get the playoff either.
No, from the outset, he's like, there's 12 guys on defense. Call timeout now. And they didn't. And he's just, well, okay, you screwed that up. They had basically, I mean, they hadn't held yet, but they had almost held on a crucial drive, tight red zone. Washington's going to do it again. They're going for it on fourth down. This is the game, really. Like, you're about to get the ball back if you hold here. Your MASH unit defense held together by baling wire and chewing gum is about to hold against this incredible Washington offense. You get the ball back. You can then drive, take the lead, and instead you screw it up by just having 12 guys on the field and not being able to fix it. And the thing about that is, like, the sideline saw it. You saw the sort of replays. They're cutting all these people on the sideline, trying to get somebody off the field. Whereas Brady had it right. You're like, you're not fixing that from the sideline with that little time. The only way to fix that is bail, call a timeout. Obviously, you don't want to, sacrifice timeouts, but like, this is why you call a timeout, because if you don't get it fixed and you have 12 guys on defense and you get the flag, you just turned 4th and 2 into 1st and goal from inside the 5, and now totally different ball game. I mean, you would bank on Washington getting it in, from a couple of yards away with 4 downs, as opposed to we got 1 down to hold. That was just critical. And this is where all the injuries on defense, like just the sheer weight of injuries, the volume over the season, really took hold for Detroit. Like, look,
they still had game.
Yeah.
Explain what happened. Second snap, Amik Robertson.
I mean, look, they've had, 16 people on defense on IR over the course of the season, or even just now, actively, I forget which, but like such a volume of defensive injuries. And, okay, a lot of the people they have left are starters. They still have Brian Branch out there, Jack Campbell, Onwuzurike, DJ Reader's back. Like, they have some players, but second snap of the game, Amik Robertson makes a tackle. Jack Campbell, actually, friendly fire comes in, blasts him in the side, and it looked very much like his arm just snapped in half. So it's like, again, right away, one of the stories of their season, right? They've had injuries everywhere. Amik Robertson, this guy that they've sort of claimed and at a reclamation cast-off from other places, comes in, has been balling out in that secondary. Amik Robertson goes down with an injury. You're like, come on. Like, heck, can this defense catch any kind of break? And then, so now you look at some of the players that were playing significant snaps for them in this game, and it's like, look, this is not a group that, A, is supposed to be on the field, or B, if they are, you expect to be able to do it without making mistakes. So, they had a bunch of guys on the field that are not used to playing together, and this is how you end up with a situation like that where somebody's on the field that shouldn't have been on 4th and 2 critically at the goal line. That's a failing, though. Number one, somebody screwed up, the personnel-wise, but it's also a failing of, the solution was what Tom Brady was calling for 5-10 seconds.
Yeah.
And you didn't get that right either. You could have saved that from the sideline, and they didn't manage to get it done. That was a massive turning point in the game.
Safety Maurice Norris Jr. played 20 snaps. Mm-hmm. He had 1 career snap. Undrafted free agent out of Fresno State comes in. And that's the playoffs. That's what makes it really difficult to predict, is you don't know when these injuries are going to hit, or who they're going to hit and who needs to come in. Clearly, that was part of the issue, though. 12 men on the field, so the Lions messed that up. Then they're down 10. They go trick play. And look, previous trick plays that worked in this game, Jameson Williams, I always forget if it's an end around or a reverse, but 66-yard run.
Well, so this is the thing. Yeah, this is important because those two plays were very closely related, right? Yeah. So the Teddy Bridgewater play, it was a fake counter to the right, and then Jameson Williams gets the ball on the reverse, right, going the opposite way of that counter play. The trick play, the Jameson Williams throw, was a fake pitch, and I forget whether this was part of the counter play for the Jameson, the first one, but it was a fake toss to Jahmyr Gibbs, right, to the right, which was then going to run a fake counter to the left, which was the initial part of the Teddy Bridgewater play, and then it was Jameson Williams on the reverse coming back the other way. So if you're Washington, you're like, this is the same play to the other side, right? Only it isn't, because this time Jameson Williams is going to pull up in the backfield and try and throw the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs, who was the initial fake toss guy. There's so much eye candy on this play, and it was showing them effectively something they'd seen early in the game, which broke off a massive run. Mike Samersil's the one guy that can kill the play, and he did. This play, right, when Jameson Williams has the ball and like pulls up to throw at like the 35-yard line and is looking downfield, Jahmyr Gibbs has got a head of steam running out of the backfield at Mike Samersil with like a third of the field to work with. And Samersil turns, bails, and manages to keep on top of him and basically kill that play dead from a coverage point of view. Jameson Williams has to just bail on the play and get rid of it, and instead he decides to throw it anyway, and it's a disaster. But like, the people that look at that and go, well, that's a ridiculous play call. What is Ben Johnson doing putting the ball in the hands of Jameson Williams? The guy's a moron. They've been killing people with trick plays all season long, including earlier in this game on a play that's a very close cousin to this one. I think that was not an unsmart play call, and it just didn't work because Mike Samersil killed it.
As I said the other night, though, as soon as you are...
Let me go and check if that initial play was...
You have the receiver. If it's not wide open immediately, throw that thing away.
Right, but it was even more complicated than that because like it wasn't open yet, but it was one of those plays where like he's got the run on him, right? And you had to sort of keep it a beat longer to see, he's actually turned and run with it. It really isn't open, and then throw it away. Like it was, I get why it got into trouble, but it was just so well played. No, so the first play did not have the fake toss. It was just a fake.
It was an end around,
fake
right?
counter. No. It was a fake counter to the right, which then had a reverse coming off the back of it. The second play was a fake toss, then a fake counter, then the end around, which then became the pass. So if you're the defense, right, you're looking at this and going, they've shown us something different, but it's going to end up being the same play. You're like, we've cracked it. It's actually smart as hell to dial that up with a pass at the back end of it. It's just that Samersil didn't bite.
What
I'm saying is justice for Ben Johnson. That was not a dumb play call.
So it's okay.
That was a smart play call that got hosed because Samersil didn't bite.
I mean, yeah, but it's still the Lions beating themselves because there's a better
no, I
play
agree,
to be made.
But many people were just like, that's a dumb play call. It wasn't. It was a smart play call.
I mean, I only like trick plays when they work, Sam.
Yeah, well, that's the way most people see it.
That is my take. Good trick play, genius.
But
bad trick play, you're too cute.
But this is the thing, right? So on a basic level, it's like, what makes good play calling? Well, did your plays work, right? Which is a pretty dumb way of looking at anything. But what actually makes smart play calling is, are you able to layer plays related to each other one after another? Are you able to set something up early in a game, come back to it later in the game, and that play succeeds because of the thing that you played in the first quarter or the second quarter, right? So this is an example of that. Ben Johnson, with his bag of tricks, we never run out, it's as deep as you want, sets up a play early in the game, and it doesn't, like, that had the benefit of both things. It was a trick play. It worked. In and of itself, it scored a touchdown, so it's a win, right? The people that only care about the results. Well, that one was a good play call. Not only was it a good play call because it scored, it was a good play call because it set up this play later in the game where you get to show them a very similar play that actually had an extra layer of disguise so that the defense is like, they think they've cracked it, right? Oh, look, you think we're going to fall for this fake toss thing, but I see what you're doing. You're setting up the same reverse that you called earlier. We've got it. That's a smart play call because you're like baiting them into something that they think they've cracked, and then you hit them with something completely different off the back end of that. Again, the only difference is Mike Samersil just did not bite, kept on top of his guy, and was able to pick off the throw that Jameson Williams ill-advisedly put in the air. I think that was a smart play call by Ben Johnson, and Samersil, for the second time in the game, turns a good play into an exceptional play by turning it over.
All right, let's talk a little Commanders here, what this means, and then we'll do a little Lions eulogy to our Lions fan friends. Commanders' first NFC championship since 1991, Super Bowl championship year with Mark Rippon. Ironically, they beat Barry. That was the only NFC championship, I think, for Barry Sanders back in 91.
Basically the only good team Barry Sanders was on.
Yeah, kind of sad. Barry didn't have a couple more deep playoff runs, but that was it.
Barry basically had Dan Marino's career, except with a running back, right? Yeah. Where you were even less empowered to do anything about it.
Can't say enough good things about Jaden Daniels. I mean, obviously the quarterback is going to be the biggest driver here. I thought the broadcast highlighted pretty well just how much they were getting after him, how much they were trying to blitz, play a little man behind him. He was not fazed by anything. There was 2 plays I mean, there's like 2 missed throws that I remember right off the bat. I think both on third down, just like bad misses from Jaden Daniels. And I think both times he came back on fourth down, either, hit Zach Ertz for a touchdown, hit McLaurin, I think it was, on another first down on fourth. He was just unfazed. And we just say this over and over and over again, how cool and calm Jaden Daniels is no matter what. And remember early in the season, I was thinking, I want to see how he handles the blitz, right? I want to see what happens when they heat him up, right? Because right now he's picking apart zones and he's tough to stop as a scrambler and as a design runner. In this game, though, 12 of 15 for 200 yards and a touchdown against the blitz, 91.4 PFF grade. And he's handled every situation. Blitz, 4-man rush, design runs, scrambles, throwing the ball effectively, not coming back from a couple missed throws, throwing the ball efficiently. Jaden Daniels just outstanding once again.
Yeah. I've seen people criticize Aaron Glenn in this game. He got too aggressive. He didn't make the changes. Like, he got exposed, blah, blah, blah. I mean, as you said, Jaden Daniels, phenomenal against the blitz, 13.3 yards per attempt against the blitz, the exceptionally good PFF grade. Under pressure, a PFF grade of 97.2, 7 of 9 for 106 yards. So under pressure or against the blitz, he was carving him up. His actual grades, when not blitzed or kept clean, were only okay, though. So if you were a real critic, you would be like, well, the Darnold game plan isn't going to work against Jaden Daniels. He's actually doing really well against that stuff. Back off, play coverage, just drop everybody, right? Problem with that is, look at the players that you've got in the back end. These guys that have played one snap before now, do you really trust them to play sound assignment coverage, without getting picked apart by the likes of Terry McLaurin, et cetera? And I think it's a reasonable answer to say no. Like, okay, it's not working. Like, we're getting aggressive and we're dialing it up and he's beating it. I do, however, think that we have a better chance of winning this way than just dropping back and getting picked apart with guys that shouldn't be out there, right? So yeah, I think Aaron Glenn was kind of caught in a tough spot, a catch-22 situation where it's like, either way, we're kind of screwed. We might as well go down swinging. That's been the ethos of this Detroit Lions team all the way through the season. If we're going to go down, we might as well go down trying to swing haymakers and make it happen. I'm not going to criticize him too much for staying aggressive.
I mean, it's not really revisionist, but we say this every year. Season-long weaknesses pop up in the playoffs, and then we say, this is why you lost. For Detroit, did they survive Aiden Hutchinson, who got hurt way back in Week 5? Yes, they survived him for most of the season. But there was a point late in the year, because you asked this on the review show. Have we seen this before? I thought the Niners on Monday Night Football were almost as effective as Washington offensively against this Lions defense. They went shootout with them, but Brock Purdy made a couple mistakes.
Yeah.
That and they missed field goals. Right. The Niners were on pace. They were ready to drop 40 on this Lions team. Like, this bad defense, injured defense that has an inconsistent pass rush and injuries on the back end and what have you. We had seen this before. Washington didn't make the same mistakes that San Francisco made, though. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it was like a microcosm of we don't have. Yeah, Zadarius Smith was a really nice pickup, but even when Hutch is out there, they don't really have the horses to create a ton of pressure with a 4-man rush. So this is just kind of how Detroit's built.
Yeah, but even imagine dropping Hutch into this game. Like, you've got a guy like Andrew Wiley at right tackle for Washington, who's been fine, good, solid all season, right? But we also have experience of seeing Andrew Wiley in the playoffs being a massive liability for a Super Bowl caliber team, right? Like, imagine what happens if Andrew Wiley, instead of, going up against the highest apex of the pass rush being Zadarius Smith, what happens if you put Aiden Hutchinson on him for 60 snaps in this game instead? Like, almost certainly has a significant swing in Detroit's favor. So what hasn't really been a problem all the way through the season, losing Aiden Hutchinson, might have been a problem in this game because he could have changed it. So, yeah, like, it's definitely – I sort of feel like a game like this has been coming for Detroit for a while. I kind of expected it to surface against Minnesota because that was a very good football team, even though they completely collapsed in the last couple of games. It didn't. They were able to completely destroy the Vikings. But eventually they were going to run into a team that was able to exploit a bad defense or a banged-up defense. And at least, withstand the creativity and the aggression that Aaron Glenn was going to throw at them and still carve them up. And then you were in a shootout, right? Now, the problem with this game, for Detroit's point of view, is like generally I would say, okay, fine, they'll win a shootout, or they'll at least be very much in it. They timed that. They found the game where Washington was going to be able to have success against their defense, and it coincided with the game where Jared Goff had turnovers. Those two things can't coexist. You can have one or the other, right? We've seen already they've won a game where Jared Goff had a bunch of turnovers and they got away with it. We've also had games where their defense has been carved up and they've gotten away with it. You can't do them both at the same time, certainly not in the playoffs. And unfortunately, that's what happened.
You might be able to sum up the game by how the quarterbacks handled pressure, which you talked a little bit about, but the official numbers for Jaden Daniels under pressure, pressured 13 times, goes 7 of 9 for 106, and 4 scrambles. That's the other thing. Didn't take a sack. He has if one of the knocks on Jaden Daniels' game is he still gets sacked, too many times, which often comes with a quarterback that's going to hold the ball longer, scramble, and try to make plays. That hasn't been the case during the 2-game playoff run here for Jaden Daniels. So 4 scrambles when under pressure. He is avoiding those negative plays, whereas Goff had both crucial interceptions came under pressure, right? The one before the half, too, even that one, Frankie Louvu, quick pressure against Penei Sewell, forces a quick step up from Jared Goff, who misses the throw, and Sanders still makes the play. The other thing I just wanted to repeat from the other night, GM Adam Peters, when you come in after 1 year, I'm always of the mind it takes a couple of years, right? But so many of the short-term moves and long-term moves, but the short-term moves that Adam Peters made, bringing in Zach Ertz for a year, bringing in Frankie Louvu, bringing in Jeremy Chin, bringing in Bobby Wagner, so many of these, and Louvu's there for a couple of years, but like cheap moves, right? A lot of these are working out, right? Dorrance Armstrong, paying him, paying Tyler Biadasz. And so some of these are short and they're long-term moves, but they're mid-tier free agency moves, and so many of these players are really starting to pay off, particularly in the second half of the season here on the defensive side of the ball.
I also wanted to give a shout out to Jonathan Allen.
Huge.
There was a 2 or 3 year stretch where Jonathan Allen was one of the best pass rushers in the NFL on the interior, right? It got him paid, former first-round pick. His career had been okay up until that point, but nothing spectacular. And then he just starts cooking 2020, 2021. PFF grades are off the charts. Pressure jumps off the charts. He ends up with a double-digit sack season in there as well. And then he kind of cooled off again. Like he sort of hadn't hit that level for a year or two. And then if you Google Jonathan Allen injury this season, what you will find is a bunch of articles that sort of say the headlines are along the lines of Jonathan Allen out for the season with torn pec, right? Tore his pec in week 6, I think, this year, which is usually a season-ending injury. You're out, you're done, forget it. Surgery. It's not just like surgery to repair the torn pec. You're done. You're done for the year. He returned in week 17 this year, right? Plays in week 17, plays in the wild card game against Tampa Bay. I mean, didn't make an impact really in those games other than he returned. Against Detroit, though, this one of the best offensive lines in football deal, he had 7 total pressures, according to PFF, had a 90.2 PFF pass rushing grade, 80.5 overall. That was one of the best games we've seen from him in years. He did it having returned from this season-ending, quote-unquote, torn pec. I mean, that's huge from Washington's point of view. They get one of their best players on defense back to the level he was earlier. Maybe it was only a one-off, right? Maybe he doesn't do that again in the NFC Championship game. But that was absolutely a factor for them winning this game.
Very impressive. Very impressive for Allen. Can't say enough good things about the entire Commanders team. And I just want to reiterate this really quick, too. Jaden Daniels not getting sacked. And what we've seen in the playoffs, we're about to talk about the Eagles, and they won, but Hurts got sacked 7 times. We saw Sam Darnold sacked 8 times. We saw C.J. Stroud sacked 8 times. In a year where it feels like offensive lines don't know what they're seeing, and there are games that absolutely where the pass rush can absolutely blow up what an offense can do. The fact that Daniels taking care of the ball without turning it over, taking care of the ball without taking those negative plays, just massive for what Washington's able to do offensively. So can't give them enough credit. And then do we want to just do a quick for Lions fans? Just feel for them,
I feel sorry for them. Like, this could easily have been their year, and yet you look at the weight of injuries that they've had over the course of the year, and you're like, it would have taken something genuinely special to overcome all that and win a Super Bowl. Could they have done it? Sure. Was it likely when you start listing off the injuries that they've had? No, not at all. And for them to even get back to this point, I mean, Dan Campbell said it last year, right? They lose the NFC Championship game against San Francisco. They were a few plays away in that game, and you're like, man, was this our chance? Was this the one shot we got? The first thing Dan Campbell says is, we may never get back here again. Like, it is hard to get back to it, to get to an NFC Championship game, let alone a Super Bowl, let alone win the Super Bowl. It's hard. Like, we're going to have to reset. We're going to have to do everything all over again. And to their credit, okay, they didn't get there. Like, they've come up a game short of that. But to get, they reset. Like, they did reboot. They were as good as they've ever been. They were better. Like, this was the number one seed in the NFC. They went into the final game of the regular season with another number one seed rival trying to take that away from them, and they annihilated them. They destroyed the Vikings in that do-or-die game to get the number one seed. So, you know, they did come back really well from a year ago. They've weathered all of these injuries, and then eventually they just had one game where, again, those two things coincided. The defense couldn't stop Washington, and their offense turned the ball over a few times. And that's how you end up, like, in the playoffs. That's enough. That's enough to lose to a good team like Washington, who is on the rise. Ultimately, though, I think going forward, it's still good, like, for Detroit. You look at them and say, Campbell's right from a year ago, right? You may never get back there again. We've seen good teams, Miami, Dan Marino, one Super Bowl run. You're like, well, every year. Marino's going to be in the Super Bowl every season. Never got back, right? It may never happen again. But they're going to be healthier next year, right? They're not going to have like a million injuries on defense all over again. You're going to have Aiden Hutchinson back, who was on his way to being Defensive Player of the Year before he got hurt. You know, the bones of this thing are still extremely good, right? Now, the biggest scare for them is what happens if they lose both coordinators and you have to weather what the Eagles weathered a couple of years ago, right? If they lose Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn in the same offseason, like, that can have a real impact. But
that's the tough pill to swallow.
But everything else is back, right? Jared Goff's back. The offensive line will still be one of the best. Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, like, all these offensive weapons. Amon-Ra St. Brown. The defense will be healthier. Like, all of these pieces are coming back and should be better next year than they were this year because they're not going to be as banged up. The scare is the coordinator thing, but, like, it's still good projecting forward for the Lions.
Plus, you're 1 year closer to having to pay everybody. I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow. This would be the year to kind of make the run. And I would also say that their depth is what got them to this point as well and helped them survive.
Right, but that's less important if you don't have a million people getting injured. Like, the depth allowed them weather as much as they did. And, you know, they made some savvy moves, like bringing in guys like Zadarius Smith. But you can offset. Like, they got extremely injury unlucky this year. If they get even averagely injury unlucky next year, that offsets even a blow to the depth, which might not necessarily happen.
Crazy stat here, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Commanders GM Adam Peters has now been to 3 straight NFC Championship games.
Good for him.
He came from San Francisco in 5 of the last 6. So that Kyle Shanahan stat that I would use, every time he has his starting quarterback, he goes to the NFC Championship. Now maybe it's just Adam Peters. Okay. As long as he has his starter, he's going to the NFC Championship.
And won none of the Super Bowls, right?
So far.
Yeah. That's not great.
What do you mean?
Well, he's basically the Buffalo Bills at this point.
Yeah, you just keep getting...
Just keep knocking on the door.
Keep getting on the green, as I always say. Yeah, I feel for Lions fans. Hope you'll still stick with us throughout the offseason, talking draft and everything.
And I'm also,
but
like...
It's a disappointing finish to the season. For a team that's just so entertaining, the way they've built their offense... the way they've built the entire team, the offensive and defensive line, the way they've drafted, the way they've used free agency, I think it's been outstanding. So, I think the Lions are here to stay and to be one of the best teams in the NFL for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. And look, the NFC Championship game that we're getting, I think, is extremely compelling and fun and should be a good matchup. I am kind of bummed, though, that we don't get to see this collision course that we were expecting all the way through the season, Detroit versus Philadelphia.
Well, let's talk about it. Philadelphia Eagles, 28-22 over the Los Angeles Rams. Eagles to the second NFC Championship in the last 3 years now. Snow game. It didn't start out as a snow game, though, but the Chris and friends and Tirico kept reminding us the snow's on its way. It's on its way.
Oh, did they remind you?
It made for an interesting strategy, though, because it was almost like, hey, we know the conditions are going to get worse. And the conditions were bad, right? I thought it was interesting hearing Stafford's comments that, like, the football's different all the time in the snow. Not every snow game's the same. And you kind of see that. Like, remember early in the year when the Bills played the Niners? It was like, this is a bad snow game. It feels like they're on an ice skating rink. There are other snow games where it's not as bad. There were some points put on the board after the snow started, but you could tell, like, there were some throws that were way off. There was receivers unable to adjust. I mean, it's tough to offense when the snow's coming down and accumulating. So it made for an interesting strategy in this game where the first half was mostly clear and just flurries, and the second half accumulating snow.
Well, NBC has been going above and beyond trying to describe the type of snow that's been coming down the last couple of snow games that they've had, you know?
Melissa and Kaylee were bringing the snow analysis
right
better than anybody I've ever seen.
I mean, look, last time they described it as what were the dots, the ice cream things that the kids eat?
Dippin' Dots.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's what it was last time around. This time,
the ice cream of the future, Sam.
This time, apparently, it was different. They didn't have a confectionery description of this particular snow, but it was a different type of snow. Because, as you say, the snow is different. It's not all the same. And sometimes the snow's a problem. Sometimes it's not really. But this time it was problematic snow. And when Saquon housed his first long touchdown, like that actually felt like it could have been a really important score because they get the big haymaker and take the lead before the conditions turn.
Right.
And then the snow starts coming down. You're like, okay, that might have been important to get out to a lead before the conditions become problematic.
Yeah, there was the fact that the Rams had a final drive to win this game felt a little crazy, right? I mean, they were down 2 scores. Saquon gets his second long touchdown.
Yeah, his second touchdown felt like it iced the game. Like that one felt like, okay, the game's done now. We've won. That's it. Over.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. They ended up still from that point having a chance with the ball in their hands to execute a game-winning drive and weren't able to make it happen.
So let's go back to the beginning here. Jalen Hurts, 44 yards on the keeper right away, right? And you talk about the first 6 carries, I think, for the Eagles had 120 whatever yards. They were averaging 20 yards a pop right off the bat. Hurts has a 44-yard keeper. But I'll say this, like the Rams kept coming back. They had a nice drive. Stafford hits Tyler Higbee. Eagles had missed an extra point. By the way, Jake Elliott missing the extra point and then hitting a couple.
Remember when Jake Elliott could kick?
But he did, like, impressive what he did later in the game. He hit a 44-yarder and a 37-yarder in the snow. But, yeah, I mean, he's been like every kicker, right? Losing track. Every kicker who used to be really dependable now just misses extra points and misses stuff randomly. I get it. But Elliott hit a 44 and a 37-yarder in the snow later. That was pretty impressive.
He's a perfect example of one who used to be, like, robotic as a kicker, able to hit the 60-plus yarders. They'd give him those shots, and now it's like, I don't even know. Like, used to be, we'll take a shot at 60 and we'll be reasonably confident he can hit that over. Now it's like, I don't know if he's going to make an extra point. Like, what the hell happens to kickers where you go from bulletproof, able to hit anything, good from 60-plus to like just calling an extra point. We're worried about whether this goes over or not. It's wild. Which, again, by the way, banned kickers. Nobody wants to see playoff games getting decided because Jake Elliott has the yips. Nobody wants it. Nobody
wants it. Nobody wants kickers at all. Every time it felt like the Eagles could pull away, though. I mean, it's a 13-10 game at the half. Eagles are up 16-13. And then, by the way, there was Jalen Hurts sacked 7 times in this game. So now the Rams have sacked quarterbacks 15 times in
16.
2 games. 15 sacks.
16.
Was it
9 times against Darnold.
Was it 9? I keep thinking 8.
Yeah. They are
16 times in 2 games.
They finished the playoffs 3 sacks away from the most sacks any defense has ever had in the postseason, and they did it in 2 games.
And they weren't a fierce pass rush.
One of which was against the best offensive line in the NFL. Like, this is nuts.
It was. And look, it wasn't just like straight dominance.
And in a snow game, right, where usually the first thing that happens in a snow game is you immediately blunt the pass rush because they can't get a footing and generate pressure. So, like, half of this game was in conditions where you're not supposed to be able to get any pressure.
Yeah, and it wasn't just straight dominance against the offensive line, but they did what a lot of defenses are doing, right? A little bit of confusion, messing up blocking schemes. Other times, I think Hurts maybe held it too long. I mean, the one I wanted to highlight was the safety. Hurts had taken, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and I was like, I'm not calling this blame. I'm just describing the situation. But Hurts got sacked twice.
Yeah.
To knock them out of field goal range.
Hurts took some awful sacks in this game.
And again, there was like blocking scheme mess up. And I don't know if he had a better answer, but what I'm saying is the Rams made huge high leverage plays to knock the Eagles out of field goal range, and or the Eagles made some awful offensive plays to knock themselves out of field goal range. And then the sack on the safety, I know Ben Solak had an image with like a million circles on the open slant that Jalen Hurts did not throw the ball to.
Yeah.
But it was quick pressure. Neville Gallimore with a sack. That made it 16-15. When that play happened, much like the Commanders game, right? You have the underdog starts, staying in there. That felt like, man, I'm like, I think the Rams might pull this off. It's 16-15. They're getting the ball back, and the Eagles are just not able to put a team away that they should be better than. But the Rams, man, really outperforming expectations down the stretch here.
It was a little like the Darnold game last week where you're like, okay, look, is your offensive line causing some problems? More so for Darnold than for Hurts. The answer being yes, right? Are you making it worse by turning those plays into sacks when there's other options available, such as simply throwing the ball away? Also, yes. Like, you had these plays where Hurts just keeps taking these terrible sacks. You're like, dude, what are you doing? You can't do that and expect to win these games. Now, obviously, they did win the game, but like that, the game got a lot closer than it should have because Jalen Hurts kept taking terrible sacks. And look, in his defense, his knee got hurt. He got his leg crumpled up in an awkward way, foot trapped underneath him during one of those tackles. And suddenly you're dealing with a guy who's used to being mobile and athletic and able to get out of stuff and isn't anymore. And he's just sort of trapped back there. So, look, that makes it more difficult from his perspective. But, you're a high-level quarterback. You're trying to win a Super Bowl. You need to know you can't take those sacks and get rid of the ball, particularly the safety. I mean, you're in the end zone. You know that. Get rid of it. And they didn't. So, again, credit to that Rams defensive line, which was incredible. And they didn't have Braden Fisk for a chunk of that game either. He got hurt pretty early and wasn't playing for most of it. Like Jared Verse off the back of getting hung out to dry for his comments about hating the Eagles fans, which he tried to walk back, by the way. I noticed they didn't necessarily bring that up anywhere. He was like, I wish I hadn't said hate, blah, blah. But he backed it up. Jared Verse was a beast in this game. That dude's power is nuts.
His first sack, I mean, Mekhi Becton wasn't looking, but Mekhi Becton's a 360-pounder.
And he buried him.
Yes.
Like, and this is the first time they played the Eagles this season. He took Jordan Mailata, who's also 360, and launched him into the air. Now, okay, again, he had a running start horizontally before the play happened, but, like, even you, right, who's threatening 3 bills on your best day, right? If you took a running start at Jordan Mailata, I don't think you'd move him. You're certainly not bringing him into the air.
Yeah, speed to power is not my game, you see.
But it is Jared Verse's game, is what I'm saying.
Power. I used to be a powerful guy.
Yeah, I'm just saying Jared Verse's ability to take 360-pound humans and launch them into the air is rare.
I'm trying to find my draft notes on him because I think I had a note at some point that was like, his power is jarring.
And he looks for it.
It surprises tackles,
yes.
Right? It's like jarring power that surprises tackles. And this was from see if I can find it, from his first game.
And what struck me about his college tape is he looks for that engagement in a way most pass rushers don't.
Speed to power was jarring early in the season. And this is when he transferred from Albany to Florida State. And his very first game was against LSU, Labor Day weekend, whatever it was. And people were like, who's this dude, right? And then it felt like later in the year, tackles were better prepared for it, and they were like, okay, this dude's got some pop. But yeah, even monster NFL players like Becton and like Mailata struggling against Jared Verse's power. So yeah, as we get into draft season, I think it's an interesting discussion because a lot of times when you're evaluating edge rushers, you want to see burst and bend and the ability to win around the edge. There is something about that, hard-hitting, edge setter, speed to power type of guy, compress the pocket type of guy. I'll also say that with as much as NFL teams are stunting and twisting, it's going to be interesting as we evaluate edge rushers going forward because I think some of the speed guys are really important, but a guy like Verse to set other people up, the number of times that he's set up Braden Fisk, who got hurt in this game, had a sack, gets hurt in this game, versus just done so much for that defense.
Or that ability to simply shock people with your power is valuable, even if you're not the one setting it up, even if you're just the guy, like the Becton play, right? He takes a hard inside line against Lane Johnson, and that sort of basically gets him to tee off on Becton, who's not really expecting it to come from the other side. The point is, every now and again, you're going to get those plays, right, with all these exchanging gaps and stunts and twists and blah, 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 where you get to hit an offensive lineman coming from the other gap and he's not expecting you coming. And if you just sort of blast into him and cause a bit of trouble or whatever, like when Verse gets those plays, like you need to be expecting him to be coming, otherwise you can't stop it, right? Becton's 360-something pounds, and because he didn't know Verse was coming, got skittled to the floor out of his own gap. Like he got hit so hard that he wasn't even able to just fall into the gap that he was occupying, right? He fell out of the gap that he was in because Verse is so powerful. Like, that is a problem.
Yeah, dude. Verse is fun. And look, the Rams, it's not just the Rams pass rush, right? They get the sack, but Hurts didn't have a ton of places to go with the ball. Again, he probably could have made a couple better decisions, especially in field goal range, and then with the safety. So it's 16-15. And it feels like, hey, the Rams are going to make a game of this. And then Saquon does it again, man. It's they kick a field goal to go up 19-15. It's 22-15, another field goal. You got credit Jake Elliott kicking these things in the snow. They were clearing off the snow for him.
Which they're not allowed to do. You see them talking about, you can't use a towel anymore. It's got to be hands and feet. Only of the people that are out there as well. It's got to be the hands and the feet of the people that are on the field at the time.
Just glad do you remember the old snowplow game?
Yeah.
Because like my dad
I remember the snowplow thing.
I mean, it was like 82, right?
But I don't remember the game. I remember
my dad used to always tell me about that. It was like a 3-0 Patriots-Dolphins game or something from 82 or whatever. Can't plow the snow anymore. It's terrible. It's weak. Anyway, 22-15. Saquon goes 78 yards to make it 28-15 with about 4-something left. And you think, okay, maybe this is over. But the Rams still had another possession to come back with a touchdown to get within 6, and another possession to maybe score the game-winning touchdown. But Saquon Barkley again in this game, 62-yard touchdown, 78-yard touchdown. I don't want to say he didn't do anything else beside that. That's like disingenuous, but the number of times that Saquon can just go like 1 yard here, 3 yards there, and then when he gets a crease, the ability to take it to the house is just unreal. I knew he had it. I knew that this would be an easier opportunity for him to do that, but he has been exceptional at it. And I'll repeat the stat that I said yesterday. Saquon Barkley has 20% of the entire NFL's 50-plus yard runs this year. 1 out of 5, Saquon Barkley. He has 8 out of the 40 50-plus yard runs this season. It's all Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. And that offensive line, like you have 360-something pounds at left tackle, you have 360-something pounds at right guard. Like, this is an offensive line that can generate you a crease. And if you get a crease with Saquon Barkley, he is uniquely qualified to turn a crease into a touchdown, and did it twice in this game. This was what happened the last time. Like, when he had the second touchdown here, again, I thought it was over. I thought this was like the first time the Rams played the Eagles, where it's like they hung tough for most of the game. It was a close game. And then the second half, the Eagles just kept leaning on them. Saquon broke off a couple, and it's like, that's it. Done. Touchdown. Like, game over. It happened again in this game. Saquon again goes for 200 against the Rams. But they found a way of coming back. Like, it wasn't game over. It felt like it should have been, but they were able to come back. Sometimes
we paint this picture, though, like, oh, if Saquon ran for 200, then they must have dominated every run play. The offensive line must have had their way. It's really not always that. Like, on the first touchdown, Becton had a monster block against the linebacker, but sometimes it's like, a couple good blocks at the point of attack, and then Barkley's doing the rest, right? You give him a little crease, and he's got a free run into the secondary, right? So you do have to credit up front, free run into the secondary.
Well, they had 200 plus yards just on the explosive runs.
Yeah.
Like, they only had, 280 something total. So they had 80 yards.
So there's a lot of, but this is where it stresses the defense, right? Even like the Bills did this with Henry. Like, the Bills were like good play after play against Derrick Henry, and then, once you mess up a gap or whatever, Henry's getting his. That was Barkley. The second one was just like the Rams weren't gap sound.
Right.
And Barkley hits the credit him, right? He presses the hole, and then once he's gone.
Have you got a 5-minute rant about what Saquon said to Jalen Hurts before that play, and did they know? And you don't.
Oh yeah.
It was like a perfect play for you and your hate of surmising what
No,
somebody said.
because I like Tirico. Tirico was doing that, right?
I think it was Chris, actually.
I like Chris too, so I won't.
Okay.
I won't call him out.
Fair, that's fine.
What did he say? Yeah, because
they showed the replay, and it's like a close up of Saquon, and then just the fringe of Jalen Hurts, and Saquon saying something to Jalen Hurts pre-snap. Chris see, he's telling him, I know what's going to happen. Just give me the ball. I got it from here. I got it. And he's like, and then Chris starts doing the Jalen Hurts bit. He's like, yeah, I've seen you do it. You've done it a lot. I'm sure you will. Like, he had the whole conversation going about what was happening, and so much so.
Maybe I shouldn't hate that as much because
They asked Hurts about this after the game. They were like, "Oh, did you know it was going to happen before?" Like they almost like took Chris's transcript of the replay and were like, "Is this what happened on this play, Jalen?" And he was like, "No."
I thought you were talking about the first one. Tirico, because what happened on the first one is Barkley kind of like slowed up a little bit, and Tirico said something.
Oh, yeah. He
was like, "Oh, you should read the
down.
name, like read the back of my jersey or something." I'm like, "No, we didn't say that either." But yeah, I mean, again, no offense to Chris, former boss here. I don't think that the Eagles called a play in the huddle, and then they got to the line, and Saquon and Jalen were like, "Hey, we're gonna score a touchdown now. Give me the ball.
Whatever you've got called, just give it to me. I can see."
Check to me.
There's a big gap over there.
Tell me.
There's a big gap right over there. The big gap there is open. Just whatever you've got called, junk it. Just hand me the ball.
That's why Chris is, great color commentator. You
Storytelling.
Storyteller.
Yeah.
Even if it's made up, it's fine. What else in this game? Quinyon Mitchell gets hurt early.
Yeah.
For the Eagles.
Supposedly not a serious shoulder injury. He got himself hurt, by the way, burying Stafford.
The implication there, though, is like not season-ending or not, surgery, but we don't know what his status is for next week or beyond. Like it could still be a 4-week injury.
No, it sounded like he was going to be playing next week, not like that level of.
I read it as like, hey, it's not one of those season-ending surgery type of deals, but I mean, he didn't come back in, right?
No.
And so Isaiah Rodgers did get attacked a little bit, which is something to keep an eye on because the Eagles have been so stout on the back end and just really consistent in this scheme. And, losing Quinyon Mitchell is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, they really need Mitchell out there. Rodgers, I mean, he made some plays in this game, right? Like he recovers the fumble, the Kyron Williams fumble, which was a huge turning point in this game.
Play.
He recovered that, had a big return off the back of it. So he's made some plays, but he's definitely a huge downgrade over Quinyon Mitchell when he has to be out there.
One of the other plays that didn't come back to bite really quick, the Eagles, so Hurts has the knee injury. They line up for a tush push on 4th and less than a yard. They're going to get it, but a false start is called on Lane Johnson. And these plays just get blown up. I mean, it's essentially a 4-point
mistake,
right? False start from Lane Johnson. This is when they're up 1.
Right.
Eagles are up 1 and they have to settle for the field goal to go up 4.
So it did come back to bite in so far as it was the comeback was only achievable because that was a 4-point closer game.
A false start, which again, it's going back like Lane Johnson is one of the best, if not the best, right tackle in the NFL. And like, how are you going to predict that, right? This is a 4-point false start that you just you don't know when you're going to do it.
Well,
this
is the thing.
So a terrible time.
Hurts had his knee injury, right? They're in these situations where they would normally be calling that push play, and they're not. And they're giving it basic handoffs, and eventually they get to the situation. All right, fine, we'll go for the push play. It's necessary here. Break glass in case of emergency. We need it right now. They line up for the push play, and I don't know whether that sort of all of that factored into Lane Johnson being just a hair itchy to get going, knowing that his quarterback is actually dealing with a knee injury right now, and this one's got to be perfect, and he just goes too early. But yeah, that was a 4-point mistake for an individual penalty, which is, pretty rare and pretty crucial. And okay, it didn't end up costing them because they won the game, but the comeback was only possible because that was a 4-point play. The other player we have to talk about in the game was Jalen Carter, who was just an absolute monster for Philadelphia. There was this amazing dynamic at some point in the game where basically, if they double teamed him, the Rams, he didn't have any impact whatsoever other than being double teamed and taking up 2 blockers. When they didn't double team him, he basically made the play every play. And Jalen Carter was the guy that knocks the ball loose from Kyron Williams. Jalen Carter is the guy that got a hand on Matthew Stafford, had one of those, is that a fumble? Is it an incomplete pass deals? Jalen Carter was the guy that got pressure on the 2 snaps, the 3rd and the 4th down at the end of the game to kill it. Like, that guy won them the game.
The last 2 plays, because I tweeted out Jalen Carter unblockable, which was true.
Certainly one-on-one.
But
turns out double team, blockable.
But the last 2 plays, they just screwed up the protection. And I don't know if it's all on Bo Limmer, the rookie center, but the sack, man. I mean, this was after Stafford hits Puka Nacua along the sideline, the contortionist, along the sideline for a big play. It's
a terrible nickname.
That's what he does. Sideline contortionist. And again, that's where I'm feeling like, man, the Rams have a chance to pull this thing off. They have a legit chance to pull it off. It's 3rd and 2, minute 12 last. These are the last 2 plays, right? But the Rams just didn't block Carter on the 3rd and 2. I don't know who screwed up. Looks like it was probably Limmer. And then on the last play, Stafford's rushed just a little bit, misses the throw on 4th and 11. That was it. Same thing, though. Carter comes in. Limmer just straight up gets whooped. Doesn't have any help from the right guard. So Jalen Carter, absolute game wrecker, but also the Rams, not a great plan for Carter on those last couple plays. 8 total pressures in this one per PFF unofficially, and that's why you get Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
In the top.
So 10. I think it was all the stunts and stuff were just screwing Limmer up. Like on all those plays, Jalen Carter looked like he was going to try and cross the face of Bo Limmer, at which point, as soon as that happens, Limmer thinks this is a stunt and looks the other side for the guy coming across.
Yeah.
Only Carter isn't doing that. He is pretending to do that and then just swipes Bo Limmer in the side and runs right into the gap that he's vacating.
To me, it's honestly one of the stories of the 2024 season is offensive lines not handling stunts, twists, plays like this. With the some of the plays in this one, even when we get into Stroud and some of the sacks that he took, it's just offensive line confusion and with walk-up linebackers. And these aren't necessarily new things, right? We talked about Mike Zimmer and the double A gap blitz and different looks and all that stuff. I mean, these aren't new necessarily, but defenses just seem a little bit better than ever at 5-man pressures, bluffing 5-man pressures, and just doing enough to confuse blocking schemes. And I think you're seeing that across the league this year.
It's also, I mean, it's more complicated than this, but like you can probably find clips from us from years ago asking the question rhetorically, like, why are teams not, like, there are teams that basically never stunt, right? And you're like, why? Why would you not? Like, stunting is more effective than not stunting. Why would you not be stunting a lot? It's like, it's almost like play action, right? Like, where's the downside to just running this more? It is more effective than regular passing. Why are we not trying to push this boundary and find out where the line is where it becomes less effective? Now you've got all the added stuff of, sim pressures and all the other things that are, I think, making it even more effective than it was when it was just effective anyway. It's like, why? It's almost like teams have finally tapped into this as a thing and been like, this is a cheat code.
One of the trickiest parts, though, now is because so many quarterbacks are mobile and able to break out of the pocket is the gap control, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you loop a defensive tackle out to take outside contain, or you're just going to get out athleted. I mean, it's a great cat and mouse game, but I do feel like it was a bad year for offensive lines as far as that goes, handling pressures. Anything else on this one? I mean, the pass game for Philadelphia, once again, just 15 of 20 for 128 for Jalen Hurts. Lost 63 yards on those 7 sacks. So another ineffective game. Made a couple nice throws that A.J. Brown couldn't haul in. A.J. Brown ends up with just 2 catches for 14 yards in this one.
Yeah, A.J. Brown didn't have a great game at all. But, they didn't need him as much as they could have. They're going to need that passing game at some point, though. And this, the Jalen Hurts injury is going to be a big storyline heading into the championship game. He played the rest of the game. He was kind of non-committal, talking about his injury after the game. He's like, look, I finished the game, didn't I? So how bad can it be? But who knows what it will be like next week, right? I would assume he plays. I can't imagine a world where it keeps him out of the game. But we saw in that game, right? He was a different player. I mean, one of the first plays is him housing a 40-something yard touchdown. If that's all off the table, if they're reticent to call push plays because Jalen Hurts got a hurt knee, all these things, I mean, this changes the offense.
I was really wondering if they might bring in Kenny Pickett just for the push play.
But he's got a busted rib. He's also injured, but in a different way.
But he was like 2 for 3 on the push, during the season. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Tanner
McKee, the push quarterback.
Eagles Commanders, the NFC East. If this was college football, we'd be talking about the power conference that is the NFC East in the disappointing NFC North. Yeah. Maybe the NFC North was overrated, Sam.
Yeah, I don't
college
think it
football
was.
discourse. College football discourse.
They just lost.
Wow, we're over an hour into this thing. Let's talk AFC in a second here. PrizePicks, though. Got to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. They've made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. We've been playing all season. Sam, you did a great job this weekend.
Thank you.
Hit all 4 of your PrizePicks projections. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. PrizePicks has invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out your lineup. If it isn't perfect, you can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your plays gets injured. So if your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. And PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When our picks hit, we get our money in as quickly as 15 minutes, which is true. Like right after your picks hit in the middle of games, boom, the account was loaded. So download the app today. Use code CheckTheMic to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CheckTheMic. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, the first AFC game Saturday afternoon. Kansas City Chiefs 23-14 over the Houston Texans. Kansas City Chiefs back to the AFC Championship every single year since 2018. Every single year since Patrick Mahomes has been the starting quarterback for the Chiefs. They've been at least in an AFC Championship. Mahomes and the Chiefs, Mahomes and Reed together, 7-0 in the divisional round now. And that's it for the Texans season.
It is.
It was a decent game. I mean, it was a decent game into the second half, right? It was 6-3 early on. I thought the Texans fought hard defensively. Talk about some of their special teams mishaps and everything. It was 13-3. Texans creeping back into it, and then, man, the drive to start the second half. Houston goes 15 plays for 82 yards to seemingly tie it, but they missed the extra point. But you take up over 10 minutes into the third quarter. It's like, all right, this is what you need to do against the Chiefs. But man, the Chiefs defense just cracked down after that. They didn't get much else.
That was an insane drive. Like the Texans at one point, this drive ends with a Mixon touchdown, a missed extra point. Fairbairn, another kicker that just decided he'd forgotten how to kick randomly. Like, again, very accurate, very good kicker. Fairbairn just goes, no, I'm just going to start shanking kicks now. Cool. So Fairbairn has an absolute nightmare in this game as a kicker. But that touchdown drive, Mixon touchdown, that drive chews up 10-plus minutes, the longest drive of the season for them, 15-plus plays, 10 minutes. You're like, okay, that could make it interesting. Take it all, like taking a ton of time off the clock, keeping it close. But then it just felt like the Chiefs just had a little spell in the game where they just tightened the screws, and the Texans had no answer to that.
Another game where Travis Kelce shows up in the playoffs. It's amazing how he shows up, right? I mean, it's not all like, look at him one-on-one, just being faster and better route runner than everybody. I mean, it was like a 49-yarder, his longest playoff catch, just on a pure busted coverage, right? They just forgot to cover Kelce. Mahomes touchdown to Kelce, outstanding, classic Mahomes. He's kind of getting pressured from 2 different areas. He's fallen down. Kelce's got the soft spot in the zone. Travis Kelce, 7 catches for 117. I swear he didn't force a missed tackle all season, did he?
5 total.
5. Okay. Felt like 0, right? Because he just didn't have that after the catch ability. Now, he was wide open. He's in the open field, but he forced a missed tackle in this one, right? Travis Kelce, you
forced a missed tackle.
Part of your PrizePicks lineup.
Yeah. Forced a missed tackle / Kalen Bullock can't tackle.
That was poor.
Which is a general problem in his game. I mean, Kalen Bullock has a bunch of interceptions this year, and so, optimistic view is like, look at the impact this young player's had. He's also been at the source of a ton of extremely bad plays. Like the negative side of his reel is pretty wild as well. I mean, this was just comes up straight up, like awful tackle attempt, and that turns that into a monster play instead of just a regular big play.
But again, I think this is what makes Kansas City so difficult, right? In a game where, okay, they only scored 23 points, but it's another one of those classic Chiefs games where the possessions are a little bit tighter, right? And you don't have to do much. You're just trying to maximize your possessions. And I think the Chiefs offense pretty much did that. They were also handed 3 points to start the game. Or they earned it from the offense was. The special teams, first kickoff return, they're immediately in field goal range. There's a penalty, puts them at the 15. They go 3 plays for -1 yard and still get 3 points. You can't beat the Chiefs if you're not covering kicks, hitting field goals, not having field goals blocked, right? The Chiefs' defense and special teams continues to just win during playoff time.
The Texans' defense, Kalen Bullock notwithstanding, has been outstanding so far in the playoffs. They've done an incredible job, and it felt like the other units for the team had been actively trying to undermine that for the first for these 2 games. Last week, like special teams, offense, everything was a catastrophe. Eventually, the offense pulled itself together for long enough to win, but like the defense has been incredible. And then this week, it's like, okay, can we try and tighten up some of that, right? We can't beat the Chiefs unless at least 2 of the 3 units in the team are playing halfway decent football. And then the opening kickoff was just a complete disaster. They give up a huge return. The Texans player then takes his helmet off. I couldn't tell if in anger or celebration, but either way, that's a 15-yard penalty. Then he's like shoving his special teams coordinator as he goes off the field, who's trying to yell at him like, dude, you can't take your helmet off. What are you doing? So the first time, like, Kansas City's taking the ball and is set up at the Houston 13 by the end of this. And okay, they didn't end up advancing and they end up having to kick a field goal. But like the very first thing you do as a team is a special teams disaster that sets up the best team in the NFL at the 13-yard line. You can't have that if you're and expect to win the game. Special teams has to be better than that. We keep talking about special teams doesn't need to be good. It just needs to not be the reason you're losing games. The very first thing it does is set up the opposition at your 13. Then you have Kaimi Fairbairn missing kicks left and right, getting blocked kicks, and not blocked kicks by, that's an amazing that's an amazing play by the blocking unit. It's like any one of 3 guys could have blocked that kick because it was coming out about this high off the ground. You're like, again, do not understand how kickers just...
Wait till the Bills lose on a blocked kick next week. Oh.
Anyway, Texans special teams again trying to destroy itself. But there was this period where Texans have that really long drive to chew up the clock. Kansas City answers with a drive, and I think that was the drive with the crazy Mahomes out of the tackle, very similar to Jared Goff play, also kind of reminiscent of that famous Andrew Luck play where he's like scrambling around, getting tackled, and then out of the tackle launches. Now that one was further and more impressive.
That was like 45 yards down the field. That was the best throw of Luck's career.
All 3 of them were kind of similar plays of like delivering a touchdown pass with your ankles being tackled at the time. So the Chiefs answer with that touchdown drive. And then from that moment on, that felt like, all right, now is when we're going to end this. And that's when Spags just went, unleash the hounds, and just everything's a blitz from now on. Like, this is it. And it felt like, to me, remember the scene in which Rocky was it, where he's making him play Rocky 2, where he's got to be left-handed for the whole fight? And then eventually Mick's like, now! Right? And he goes right-handed and just starts haymakers and burying him. Yeah. This was like the Chiefs' defense. We're playing left-handed up until now. And then, like, this was the moment where Spags was like, now! And then just right-hand haymakers of the blitz, and the Texans had no answers. Like, we've seen it all season long. That offensive line's the classic example of what you were talking about earlier. No answers for stunts, blitzes, anything complicated, anything other than the 4 guys in front of them rushing right at them. The Texans' offensive line has not had answers for it all season long. Same thing here. Like, as soon as Spags just went, boom, do it, pressure every play.
Yeah, and the first one was Chris Jones on rookie Blake Fisher, right? The number of times we've mentioned a million times here, the times that Chris Jones just lines up wide and wins. I mean, he really is like TJ Watt in that sense, where it's like you need a key sack, and not only am I going to win the one-on-one against the right tackle, but I'm going to finish the play, right? It's not the thing that we always talk about, the pressure, but like win clean and finish the play. That was the first sack. Chris Jones.
But it's even worse than that because at least TJ Watt doesn't move. He stays there every play.
Yeah.
So you at least know where he is, and there's probably extra help there. Chris Jones, on any random play, sometime in a critical situation in the game, is just going to, you break the huddle, line up, looking right in front of you in the A-gap to look for Chris Jones, and then suddenly it's like, uh-oh, he's over there, like rushing in the wide 9 against our young right tackle. This is a problem.
To the point where, remember, the first game of the season, was it Justice Hill that was stepping in? Whatever, the Ravens blocking scheme got screwed up, and Justice Hill was picking them up in crucial late game situations and doing pretty well. Charles Omenihu had the strip sack on C.J. Stroud, where he's essentially unblocked. And that was the same thing. Shaq Mason doesn't block Omenihu because there's a linebacker in the A-gap. And look, I don't know, we've been questioned if we don't criticize our friend Bobby enough. But I'll criticize the Texans and Bobby and the scheme, whoever's fault it is. This season, they have been awful at knowing who to block. Awful. And then there's times when you're just not going to block. Like Fisher knows who to block, and he didn't do it well, right? He's a rookie second rounder who's not as good as Chris Jones.
Yeah.
But the number of times that Houston did not know who to block, terrible, man. It's rough. And that was the Omenihu sack. You have another one that's more of a coverage sack, and Travell Wharton kind of bull rushes, the interior line into Stroud's lap. The 4th and 10. So I saw people saying you have a tight end blocking a defensive end. That's just bad scheme. George Karlaftis. This play had nothing to do with the tight end's block. It was the Spags factor, right? When it is, and this is where you need blitz answers. And look, I don't even know if Bobby schemed up the perfect play. I don't even know if you can have 4th and 10 all-out blitz answer, or good ones at least.
Right.
The way the Chiefs play, because the Texans would go 7-man protection, right? 3 men out on the route, and the Chiefs just come all out, right?
Well, the problem is all of it was bad, right? Like you've got Blake Fisher, who, he can't really block George Karlaftis, let alone the plays where Chris Jones goes out there to make his life even worse. So you've got individual problematic areas, right, where Blake Fisher simply can't block the guy he's assigned to one-on-one. Then you've got, well, okay, how do you fix that? We try and assign some extra help, chips, backs, tight ends. Well, Dalton Schultz had multiple plays where he was a disaster in pass protection, helping out Ogunbowale as well as a running back. Multiple plays where he made it worse as well. So you got like the help that we're assigning is actually not helping. The help is not helping. And then you've got okay, yes, all the way through the season, this has been a bad team at picking up blitzes, stunts, exchanges, all this kind of thing. I'm sure a big part of that is this is not the 5 that is supposed to be out there they've been changing constantly. Like one of the things that the nerds, the data analyst people have said is there is a power to continuity on the offensive line. There is value to being able to start the same 5 guys in the same 5 spots week on week on week. And I'm sure given this season, like the proliferation of all these stunts, exchanges, sim pressures, all the stuff we're talking about, I would imagine that power only gets more magnified over the coming years if that's the way this is going to be. The Texans have been chopping and changing that offensive line constantly, right? Now this offensive line is Laramie Tunsil left tackle, right tackle Titus Howard playing left guard, one of the 2 centers that they've been rolling through at center, Jarrett Patterson in this case, Shaq Mason back in the lineup, having been out of the lineup at right guard, and then Blake Fisher, a young right tackle, trying to deal with these pass rushers. So it was bad. And yeah, they didn't have answers, but it was bad everywhere. If they had answers, they were going to get beaten one-on-one anyway. The help stuff that you do schematically to try and help out bad players was getting its ass kicked as well. And they didn't have the answers for the creative stuff that the Chiefs were doing on defense. All of that adds up to, in the second half, when Spags released the Hounds, it was just game over.
Yeah, I don't know what the 3rd and 10, this last 3rd and 10, it's Dalton Schultz and Ogunbowale trying to block George Karlaftis.
Right.
They have no chance. It's just all bad. It's just all bad. By the way, the way defenses are playing, I'm looking forward to the offseason discussion, the way some of these the Abdul Carters and Jalen Walkers of the world, I've said this before, but their athleticism and their ability to be factors on twists and stunts and be hybrid linebackers, I think is a a fascinating time for those guys to enter the league the way defenses are playing right now.
It's also kind of interesting in terms of the head coaching cycle now. We've been on a run now of the last few years, like offense is everything, right? Who's the next hot offensive mind to pair with our quarterback, and that's how we win. Now, I wonder if you're going to get some defensive head coaches because suddenly creativity on defense is back in vogue, and these guys are causing all kinds of problems. Like, is this? I mean, Flores is the obvious name in terms of somebody that's a potential go-around candidate again, but like Aaron Glenn, like all these other defensive candidates, maybe these are guys that are going to get the hirings.
All right, I just want to say I was really impressed by C.J. Stroud in this one. Some of the tight window throws that he had to make. I mean, if I had to describe Spags' defense, it is just low percentage. He creates low percentage opportunities for the offense. You have to be pinpoint. And there was a few of those downfield passes, Dalton Schultz and some other tight window throws that C.J. Stroud made that I thought helped keep the Texans at least in the game. He scrambled a bunch pretty effectively. I thought that was a big part of his game. Now, look, he got sacked 8 times, and, as we said, with every quarterback, there's probably some better alternatives on some of those plays, right? Especially on 4th and 10, even though everybody's coming at you, like throw up a prayer, do something. So that could have been better. But I was impressed with what Stroud was able to do here.
And even late in the game, like they kind of ran out of time, but they made some big plays on offense down, with a couple of minutes left, down 11. I mean, they kept swinging.
They did. And look, as we say all the time, season-long weaknesses tend to pop up in the playoffs. I think you made the point. The weakest unit is, we'll say, the pass protection offensive line of the Texans, right? And it showed up. Right? We knew that. And that's what's going to be interesting in the matchup this week. Spags against Josh Allen and the Bills. The Bills are much better up front. Allen is ninja at sack avoidance, just like Patrick Mahomes is, but you're just trying to create enough indecision to create some, again, tight window throws that, make it difficult on the offense. But another game where I think Kansas City dominated defensively and on special teams.
Yeah. Now we have to have the officials discussion.
All right.
Let's keep it tight.
Do it.
Well, I think
the first one was the bad roughing the passer call.
Yeah. So I think the best way of summing this up was the tweet that I had, which is generally, I mean, this is the thing every time the Chiefs play, particularly in the playoffs, right? The refs and the Chiefs are in bed together. It's rigged, blah, blah, blah. Generally, I think that's ridiculous. I think people say that, and it's crazy. People said it about the Patriots as well, right? When any team that's winning a lot, it's going to be, it's rigged. The NFL has it. They want the Chiefs to win. Generally, I think that's bullshit. This game, however, on its own, almost made me reconsider that with some of the ridiculous officiating calls that all went Kansas City's way. And the Texans were talking about it afterwards, and honestly, they were right. Like, they were saying, we got hosed by the officials. We knew going into this game it was going to be us against everybody. And by everybody, I mean the stripy people over there that were calling things for Kansas City. Some of the decisions were ridiculous. Like both of the roughing the passer calls on Mahomes were bad. Mahomes is making it worse by he's doing all the replay of the discussion that was had around Al Shahir decking Trevor Lawrence and concussing him when Trevor Lawrence slid like 5 yards in front of him. It was all stupid because that play was not the play to make that discussion about. This was the play. The second one where Mahomes is like dancing around, trying to weave in and out of defenders, buy time, eventually realizes he's like run into a cul-de-sac and the only way out of this is a hit. So like goes right between two players and then right at the end like launches himself backwards to try and like slide. Only it's way too late at that point, and these two guys converge, hit each other more than they hit him, and make some head contact. That's the play where it's like, you caused that, not them, you. That was the play to make that discussion about at what point do we say the quarterback is actually responsible for his own safety here, not the guy trying to hit him when he's dancing around, trying to extend play endlessly and not looking to slide until the hit is already there. Mahomes started to absolutely take the piss in terms of playing the system, right? And then after those two egregiously bad roughing the pass call, he's going towards the sideline, slows up to like invite a hit from a defender, and then when he gets shoved, like flops out of bounds and tries to draw another flag. And you're like, I was actually amazed that it didn't work based off the previous
that was
plays.
2 plays after he essentially induced the unnecessary roughness on the scramble.
But I was actually staggered that it didn't work, and he got another one, but he didn't. For some reason, they didn't call that one. But like this, Mahomes has now become the player that everybody has been complaining about. Like that guy is trying to game the system and get bad calls.
But this isn't new. I mean, people highlighted this before. The plays where it looked like he was going to run out of bounds and then he cuts back.
But I actually don't think
like he's kind of tilting his body just a little bit into fake slide, not full fake slide territory, but kind of.
I actually don't think most of those plays are an example of him doing that. I think most of those plays are actually an example either of bad defense and defenses being afraid to actually hit him, or him just playing what he sees and sort of recalculating on the fly. Actually, there's 5 more yards in this if I don't go down now. This, though, was absolutely a case of him trying to play the officials.
I mean, I don't know. And
I don't even blame him for that, by the way.
That sequence was an embarrassment, by the way. It was bad for the game, especially because what I hate about these things right now is everybody holds their breath when there's an almost late hit. Everybody holds their breath. Oh, no, he shoved him. He shoved him by the sideline. Is it going to be a whole 15 yards? As I keep saying, 15% of the field we're just going to hand over if you push a guy like a smidge late. And now we have quarterbacks trying to, like, game the system, game the rules, right? I hate that. It's bad for the game, especially the flop. I've said before, and look, I know Chiefs fans are like, oh, you got to say this about Josh Allen. Fine, I'll say Josh Allen flops like crazy and begs. And Mahomes was begging for a ton of calls.
Right.
It's like you're getting all the calls, and you're still begging. And Allen is flopping. Allen, you are 240, and you truck linebackers. Stop begging and flopping and like penalize flopping.
Yes.
Okay, and put a little bit more of the onus on the quarterback. If the rules are there, they're there to protect quarterbacks for the better of the game, so we don't lose them, and for the better of your brain because of all the concussion studies, so that you don't take these hits. If you're going to induce these late hits just to steal 15 yards, it's bad for the game, it's bad for you, it's bad for everybody.
But to be clear, I don't even blame Mahomes for that. I think this is what the NFL has set up. It has created a system where it is beneficial for quarterbacks to try and game it and to try and steal 15 free yards, right? Like, this is what we have set up now. You know, quarterbacks have complained about calls the whole time. You see them, getting up, like, trying to get the face mask call that they feel they should have had. This is just an extension of that. We have created this system where somebody like Mahomes or Josh Allen, if they know that if they flop, there's a pretty good chance the official is going to give them the benefit of the doubt, throw a 15-yard flag, and that's huge for the offense. That needs to be stamped out by the NFL. That needs to be an institutional change where we say, if you can see any form of simulation, flopping, penalize it. Say, you were going to get a penalty. That was an illegal hit out of bounds. But because you flopped like a child, like a soccer player, we're actually reversing it. We're actually flipping the penalty. It's going the other way now because you did that. You do that, even if you're wrong, right? And this is why the NFL won't do it. Even you're going to get a play where it's actually not really simulation, or it's close enough that it's debatable. It's like it would be an absolute shitstorm, but it would stamp it out immediately. If you just went 5 of those plays in high leverage situations, and instead of getting a 15-yard penalty, the quarterback just walked himself back 15 yards, the guy's never diving again. Like, it would immediately stop it, but the NFL won't do it because if you screw that up once on a judgment call, that'll be the bigger story than the debate around the simulation in the first place.
I am interested because I think there is a human nature aspect to officiating, right? They're human. And people say, like, arguing about calls works over time, right? If you argue enough, it puts a little bit of indecision into an official's brain that maybe they're not going to call it the next time. And I wonder how much the fact that Troy Aikman was very vocal about this, right? He was upset about these bad calls, in that it's been the Chiefs, conspiracy theory stuff. It's not even that extreme. It's just that these are bad. And, like, the first one, when it's on 3rd and 8 and it's a bad roughing call.
Those are game-changing. I mean, it's like
I'm almost of the mind, like I said this the other night, like, what if you just called it a do-over? Like, at worst. I hate that it's a free 15 yards on an incompletion on 3rd and 8, right?
Yeah.
And this is for every team in the league. The difference when you work so hard to get a team off the field on 3rd down, and all of a sudden you're going to get a free 15-yard first down. That led to 3 points for Kansas City. It was a 4%. We talk about coaches, by the way. 4% win probability change if you go for it first. That was a 4% win probability change at the time, a bad roughing call. So the officials are making this 4% swing here.
Yeah.
My point really quick, though, is I wonder if this was vocal enough that, officials are like super cautious this week with Chiefs Bills.
Yeah. To reiterate, I think generally the Chiefs do not really benefit from officials being from favorable calls from the officials. I do, however, think in this game they benefited a lot from at least 3 bad favorable calls that went their way. I saw
some of the stats out there too, but they were all volume stats.
Yeah,
and that I don't think that's telling.
I don't think that they're benefiting disproportionately to other teams. I think that they've just benefited in critical situations.
It's always. It always seems to be on third. But it's not. Go back to late hit on third down in the AFC Championship and but holding on third down in the Super Bowl.
But those are razor thin calls. These are not this is not what happened in this game where they got at least 3 just bad calls that were not razor thin, that were not, this is going to go either way and it just went their way. It was like, this is a bad call that looks fixed. Like the 2 roughing the passer calls were egregious. There was a textbook, it could have been on a teaching video of this is a hip drop tackle. And they didn't call it. They didn't flag it. If you're not going to flag that, then you're literally saying we're not flagging this as a penalty. It doesn't exist. So the Chiefs in this game, I think, egregiously benefited from officiating. I don't think that is the standard for what happens to them generally. But those are game-changing plays. I wanted to take a minute to say Troy Aikman, it was hilarious how angry he was getting at this stuff. Troy Aikman has become an incredibly good color commentator. He's
speaking his mind.
I did not like Troy Aikman for a long period of time. I didn't think he was particularly good. And then somewhere along the way, Troy Aikman decided, you know what? I just don't give a crap anymore. I'm just going to say what I'm thinking and let rip, and that's what I'm doing. And he became so much better once he decided that. And I was trying to work out when it happened. People were saying it was when he went to ESPN. I don't think that's the timing. It might have been when Tony Romo got the ridiculous giant contract for just calling plays. Maybe that something snapped in Troy Aikman that made him go, this injustice. Saw that suggestion. Yeah. This injustice has so hurt me to my very core so much that I'm cutting loose now. I don't even care anymore. I'm just letting rip. Whatever it is, I think we both think that Greg Olsen is the best color commentator in the game. I think that's still true. But I think Troy Aikman has now become number 2. I think Troy is really, really good.
Insulting your former boss here.
I just think Troy Aikman has now become the second best guy. He calls it like it is. He's perfectly willing to say when something is bullshit, even if it's disagreeing with the rules analyst, who's a waste of space conceptually, not the individual. The rules analyst is a conceptual waste of space on broadcast anyway. But Aikman has just become so good. I think he's fantastic now.
Yeah, I agree. He's been
very
good.
I don't think that used to be the case.
I also think Joe Buck has grown on me. He used to get criticized for a lack of emotion in both baseball and football, but I think he's got the right balance.
Yeah, I'm not wild on Buck.
That's fine. You don't like most people. I can't believe you've complimented 3 announcers in your entire life here now. That's it. So Chiefs take care of business 23-14 over the Texans and setting up the rematch with the Bills next week. Unbelievable job by the Chiefs. Another classic playoff game for them, though, man, right? They take care of the football. They don't make the mistakes. They have the blocked field goal. They have the big, long kickoff return. They always seem to come through in all 3 phases and, efficient offense. And it's going to be another epic matchup, I think, against the Bills next week.
Yeah, excited for it.
All right, let's get to that game. Bills get the win 27-25 over the Baltimore Ravens. Buffalo onto the AFC Championship for the first time since 2020. And bitter pill to swallow for the Ravens. Of course, the biggest play of the game was the last significant play. Ravens are down 8. Long touchdown from Lamar Jackson to Likely? To Isaiah Likely for the 24-yard sliding touchdown. 2-point conversion dropped by Mark Andrews.
Yeah, Mark Andrews.
Would have tied it. Now, it doesn't mean the game was over.
Correct.
We would have had a tie game with a minute 33. Buffalo had at least 1 or 2 timeouts, I think, if not all 3. Minute 33 for Buffalo to drive down in the snow for a potential game-winning field goal. And Tyler Bass had hit a 51-yarder earlier, so that was impressive. Buffalo still would have had a chance here, but obviously, once Andrews dropped the 2-point conversion, this game was all but over.
Yeah, rough day for Mark Andrews. which is a real shame for him because he's a great player and has been huge for the Baltimore Ravens generally, for years. He did, however, have a disaster of a game here where he had that critical drop on the 2-point conversion. He had another drop as well, right, early in the game, and was the guy that fumbled the ball.
Lamar's first pass, he was wide open up the seam or up sideline and dropped it.
Yeah, and fumbled the ball after a completed pass over the middle, trying to make extra yards after the catch. Just an utter nightmare of a game for Mark Andrews, which is really unfortunate when you can literally point to one guy and say, you're kind of the difference between winning and losing this game. I mean, it's unfortunate when that one guy isn't the quarterback. When it's a quarterback, it's sort of like it comes with the territory, right? Like, this is why you're getting paid $55 million a year and everyone focuses on you. You get the credit when it works. You get the blame when it doesn't. When it's like the tight end, it's like, that just feels wrong.
Lamar Jackson had his 2 turnovers as well.
Well, they happen
to be in the first half.
Yeah.
And because you're the quarterback, you have more opportunities to make it good.
Well, he
did make it good outside of those 2 bad plays.
We have a very difficult discussion with Lamar Jackson because of that whole dynamic, right? Lamar Jackson generally in the playoffs has been a lot worse than he has been in the regular season. Now, the last game, he was outstanding. In this game, he had 2 very bad plays that were turnovers. He had the bad interception where it was pressure by Milano, and he just sort of put the ball up in the air with a prayer, and it gets picked off. You can say that's an arm punt. It didn't cost him that much, but it was a bad decision that turned the ball over. You have the fumble where, again, it's pressure. He thinks he can beat DeMar Hamlin one-on-one in space. Not an unreasonable assumption. So it was a bad snap, first and foremost. Then he gathers it, thinks he can beat DeMar Hamlin in some space, tries to sidestep him. Hamlin gets hold of his ankle. He's not letting go. And then Lamar loses the handle on the football and just coughs it up. That's a very bad play, turnover. So now you're like, well, it's happening again. Lamar's melting down in the playoffs again. It's going to be the same old story. Lamar just chokes in the postseason, blah, blah, blah. From that moment on, though, he actually played really well. I was surprised. I thought he was melting down. Like, I thought, it is happening again. Here we go. But actually, Lamar plays really well from that moment on, does execute a comeback, does bring them all the way back, scores what should have been the game-tying touchdown, puts the 2-point play in his tight end's hands in the corner of the end zone, and his tight end doesn't come up with it. Now, you can't say the earlier plays didn't matter, right? The turnovers were irrelevant. But you have to at least acknowledge the number of impressive clutch comeback stories in history that have started by that guy digging the hole in the first place, right? Andrew Luck made a career out of digging himself out of a hole that he dug himself into in the first place. The number of Joe Montana comeback stories that began after 3 interceptions, Joe Montana was lights out and, executed this comeback and blah, blah, blah. So had Mark Andrews caught that football, we might completely change the narrative on Lamar Jackson. Now, okay, there's still time on the clock. Buffalo could have answered. They could have scored. It could have been game over anyway. But Mark Andrews catching or otherwise a 2-point conversion is changing the way we discuss Lamar Jackson in a way that I find difficult to analyze.
I felt like my maybe poorly curated timeline on Twitter was more people getting ahead of the conversation that hadn't even happened yet and being like, don't blame this on Lamar. It's not his fault and blah, blah, blah. It's like nobody even said it yet. And Nick Wright, of course,
Friend of the show.
Took his shots.
Shouty show. Exploded.
But I'm like, I think both things are true. I think it's all true. Lamar played well overall. And there's a couple very key plays in this game that he made that, say, Josh Allen and the Bills didn't make. Very key plays. Because the story of this game is turnovers. The story of this game, then turnovers and drops, right? 3 bad turnovers by the Ravens, 2 of which are Lamar's fault. 1 was Mark Andrews' fault, and then a drop that certainly would have tied the game. So I think both things are true, right? In the totality of Lamar Jackson's playoff career, they've had more of these duds than him playing well. In the 2 playoff games this year, he played very well. But there's still some of those back-breaking couple plays that he's gonna want back.
But this is like,
but you don't sit here and be like, oh, this is like the legacy stuff's gonna show up like a year from now when people are gonna forget the play-by-play of this game. right? They're just going to say, oh, he's 3 and whatever in the playoffs, whatever his record is, and he's a choker.
It's going to show up today. It's going to show up on the shouty shows.
I mean, there's enough
now.
people, just like there's enough people that talk about sports that, yes, somebody's going to be out there.
No, this is not a fringe minority opinion that's going to be floating around the internet on Monday. This is what the story is going to be. And this is the problem, right? We had it in our chat last night, right? Does this change the way your MVP, if the MVP vote lasted into the playoffs, would you flip it based off this game, right? The implication of that being Josh Allen outplayed Lamar Jackson in this game, therefore the MVP should be flipped, right?
That's going to be. I don't think he did. I mean, Allen didn't, but he didn't turn the ball over.
That's
right?
the point, right? So this is because of the way this game ended and because Lamar Jackson made mistakes in this game, the analysis will be on every single shouty show all day today that Lamar Jackson choked this away. His mistakes are why they lost this game. He got outplayed by Josh Allen. Whereas in reality, I don't think he necessarily did get outplayed by Josh Allen, but Josh Allen didn't make turnovers that Lamar Jackson did. Now, that's fine, but Lamar Jackson's turnovers might also not have mattered if Mark Andrews had caught a couple of footballs and hadn't fumbled. So my problem is simply if Mark Andrews didn't have a bad game, the narrative on Lamar Jackson changes. That's the problem. That's why this is a problematic discussion that we would change our analysis of Lamar Jackson's individual performance in this game based off whether Mark Andrews catches a football and doesn't put one on the turf.
I get it. I get it.
Which, again, is not to say Lamar was perfect. He made mistakes.
Yes.
It's just that we wouldn't care about those mistakes if Mark Andrews didn't have a worse game.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, game flow wise, both teams started out hot, then the defenses kind of fought back a little bit, and then the Ravens had that one drive where they pretty much ran it down the Bills' throat. I mean, it was this back and forth game where it looked like the offenses would be unstoppable, and then the defenses fought back. I mean, overall, one of the toughest things about football analysis is when a defense essentially gives up a lot of yards, but they get the timely turnovers.
Right.
And that's kind of what Buffalo did, right? I mean, Mark Andrews, when he fumbled, was wide open. The number of wide open passes, like the Bills, the very start of the game was interesting to me because the Ravens, they run Derrick Henry, and the Bills are like, not today. That is not happening. We're crowding the box, and they stop Derrick Henry. First 3 carries go nowhere. But the first 2 passes, Andrews is wide open and drops it, and then there's another pass up the seam for a huge gain. So it's like the Ravens have 2 explosive passes, but then nothing from Derrick Henry. It was like the Bills are saying, here, win through the air. And the Ravens did move the ball pretty effectively, but a Lamar bad interception, the fumble, which flipped the field. It was that one was significant, right? It was a bad snap. Lamar tries to do too much. Von Miller picks it up and gets it into Ravens territory. Huge play right there. And then the Andrews thing, he's wide open. Credit Terrell Bernard for forcing the fumble, but it's a tough one because the Bills' defense, I think, had some holes, but they made those key plays, which were huge. And you start stealing possessions, and that's how you pull it off, man.
Yeah, it is. I think Buffalo's both run games actually were really the stories of this game. Everyone's going to focus on Lamar Jackson choking, MVP discussion, blah blah blah. The run games, I think, were everything in this game. Buffalo's run game is really impressive, and the one thing I think that's worth. The turnovers are relevant because they were a huge part of the game and because Buffalo is able to consistently force them. That's the other element, and that's something we probably didn't dedicate enough time to in the preview show. We were sort of focusing on, look, how does Buffalo stop Baltimore's offense on a down-to-down basis? And they didn't really. Like Baltimore, they put up 400-plus yards of offense. They had significantly more yards of offense than the Bills did. They didn't stop that offense. But you can give up a lot of that if you then create a bunch of turnovers. And Buffalo, I think, has won the turnover battle every game this season, I think they were saying. They led the league in turnover margin. They are able to consistently force turnovers. And as long as you're able to do that, you can actually get run over quite a lot and still be okay. So that was one element that Buffalo was able to run the ball. Baltimore was also able to run the ball, but Buffalo's defense was able to force the turnovers. One thing I was curious about, remember coming out of the Pittsburgh game, you're like, Baltimore's running all these read option looks, and it's uniquely challenging for a defense because the guy that you're putting in space one-on-one is either Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson, and both those guys are capable of destroying an individual defender one-on-one. They barely used any kind of read option look in this game. I did not understand that. 4 times that happened in this game. They ran a read option look. Why? I would have been running that every play in the first quarter until they showed me they had defenders that were able to stand up to either of those two guys.
I don't know. It did feel like they were trying to get the under center ground game going early. They had that one drive. What was the scoring drive where they went? What was it? So it's 21-10. They score. They kick a field goal. When the touchdown to make it 21-19, they go 7 plays for 80 yards. I think all but one was a run, and that was when it was like, here's your second half. Wear him down, Derrick Henry. And oh, by the way, I mean, as difficult as it is to stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, Justice Hill and his speed, he had 50 yards on 6 carries, right? They were getting him into space as well. And then right before Andrews fumbled, of course, I was joking, the rushing trio of Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, and Mark Andrews are tough to stop because they would just put Andrews under center for the QB sneaks, and he had 2 first downs there. So, I mean, the Ravens still had a lot of success. I mean, it really does come down to me to losing possessions. The Bills took some away early, but I think losing possessions ends up being the biggest difference in the game. And that's why like the Lamar discourse, I'm sitting on the fence. It's fair and it's not, right? In a game like this, right? It is overly simplistic to just look at like touchdowns and turnovers, right? Because that's what a lot of social media headlines do and everything. Like, this guy had this many touchdowns and this many turnovers, right? And Lamar had 2 touchdowns and 2 turnovers. And Allen had 2 touchdowns and no turnovers. There it is. That's the difference in the game. And, like, there's a kernel of truth in that, Sam. There's a kernel of truth in that, where if you take away 2 Lamar plays, it changes the outcome of the game. It's not handing the Bills opportunities to score, and it's giving you opportunities to score. There's a kernel of truth of that. But it's overly simplistic to look at, like, 4 plays and say that's the entire game, when, as you mentioned, like, Lamar Jackson throw for throw outside of that was very good, including 3+ minutes left, down 8, and he did everything right. He led the touchdown drive to Likely on a great play, and then had the 2-point conversion.
Yeah. My problem with that idea of, you take away those 2 plays, by definition, like, it was a 1-score game. It was a 2-point margin of victory. You take away any 2 plays that are in any way positive or negative, you're probably changing the outcome of the game. So because they're turnovers, and we're conditioned to know that turnovers are really important and have a giant swing in win probability, et cetera, it's easy to say you take away those 2 plays and Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens win this game.
Yeah.
But you take away 2 plays from Josh Allen, 2 positive plays, right? Any 2 positive plays that changed, like the first down, et cetera, they probably don't win the game. Like, it's just that we don't care because they're not turnovers. It's just too simple. Like, we're dumbing this down too much to Lamar had turnovers, therefore Lamar choked in the playoffs again, therefore Lamar is a serial choker. Josh Allen should be MVP. Like, I can see the shouty show conversations that are taking place while we're doing this.
We don't need to. We don't.
They're all the same.
It's Monday.
It's more nuanced than that. Lamar did not. This is
Yeah, I'm bringing the nuance. I'm saying that he played well, but losing 2 possessions in what ended up being a 2-point game is massive. Even if they had tied it, it ends up becoming absolutely crucial, and the Bills didn't have that, right? And so the turnovers end up essentially being the story of this game.
There will be a healthy chance that Lamar Jackson ends this postseason with the best PFF grade of any postseason quarterback this year, like, based off his 2 performances. And yet the narrative will be, same old Lamar, still didn't do it in the postseason.
I get it. Allen and the Bills, interesting one for me offensively, and we'll talk about that late decision that they made here. But I thought this was, pull out the cape, break glass in case of emergency, and they didn't necessarily do that with Josh Allen. It was a run-heavy approach, really run-heavy approach. They did a great job leaning on Josh Allen in short yardage and, using the sneak when they need it. I mean, that has the same way it's a built-in advantage for the Eagles and the tush-push. It's a built-in advantage having Allen, and they leaned on that well. But I was a little surprised by that, especially against a Ravens very stout defensive front where they usually are pretty good stopping the run. And, yeah, the Bills had an effective run game for most of the game. I was a little surprised by that. that it wasn't a little bit more of a Josh Allen game. And in the second half, I'll say this. When you're up 11 and the Bills come out and they punt twice, and I think Allen maybe checked to like a pretty bad screen, but checked to a screen to Dawson Knox on 3rd and 5. I just hated that. And I don't know if it was all Josh Allen's fault or if that's like the play that he's supposed to check to based off of Joe Brady. But I wish there was a little bit more, lean on Josh Allen in this game. It's fine. They won. But I'm interested in next week what this looks like. I think you need more Superman Allen. But once again, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit. It's impressive that the Bills can win these games now, which they weren't doing this 3 years ago, winning games like this that are really a well-rounded team effort.
Well, this is the thing. I don't know that they do need this Superman Josh Allen. This is potentially one interesting development to this Bills team. Everyone has been focusing on the pass game and been like, if this collection of receivers is able to help Josh Allen, then Josh Allen doesn't need to be Superman. But what's actually happened, certainly so far in the playoffs, which is a 2-game sample size, the run game has been the thing that's taken over and taken the weight off Josh Allen's shoulders. And Buffalo handed Baltimore and Denver, who are arguably the 2 best run defenses in the NFL this season, the worst run performance that they've had so far. They absolutely ran all over Denver. Their success rate in the run game was off the charts in both those games. They've been able to run the ball at will against elite run defenses, so Josh Allen doesn't have to be Superman in the pass game. And okay, every now and again they'll break it out, or he can add to that in the run game. And, Troy Aikman has become one of the best color commentators in the game. Meanwhile, Tony Romo has regressed to just screaming out, "Watch his legs," every couple of seconds. Allen's a threat in the run game as well. This has become one of the best rushing teams in football in January in cold weather, when that's a really important thing relative to September football games in a dome. The Bills are propping themselves up with the run game, not with receiving core.
Yeah, it's a good all-around effort for Buffalo. And so here's the big decision here. Buffalo's up 5, 24-19. They 3rd and 2, was it? They run QB power with Josh Allen.
Yep.
He gets stopped. Doesn't get stopped very often. When you decide to run Josh Allen downhill, 1 or 2 to go, doesn't get stopped very often.
So what do you think of that call?
So now it's at 4th and 1 or 4th and 2?
Make sure I got 4th and 2. It's not. They didn't gain anything on that play.
So 4th and 2, right?
I assume. I'm looking at the play right now, and he didn't gain yardage. That's not to say they didn't credit.
3rd and 2, he gets stopped for no gain.
Yeah.
You have 3:31 left or 3:40 left, and you're up 5. And they go 4th and goal from the 2. They go Tyler Bass, 21-yard field goal. I have to say that I didn't hate the field goal call. I get the go for it. Here's what I would say. I have a feeling if they had this exact same situation against Kansas City, they would go for it, right? They went for 4th and 2 this year when they were up 3 against Kansas City to go up 2 scores. A little different situation. But they got it, and I feel like against Kansas City, there's a little bit more of the fear of Mahomes, who always gets it done in those situations. And in this situation, to go up 8, right? And,
Yeah.
and it worked out because you have to get a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. And part of that calculus is Mark Andrews could guys can drop the ball, or you have to execute to get the 2-point conversion. That's why I don't hate it. I don't hate it because it was 8. If it was 7, I might hate it a little bit more, because then you actually put Baltimore. Maybe they want to go for 2, but I don't hate it going up 8. What are your thoughts?
That's why I think they would have kicked regardless, because it makes it a full 1-possession game where you need both the touchdown and the 2-point conversion. There's also 4 minutes still on the clock. It's not ending the game, even if you get the touchdown and go ahead 2 scores. But what's interesting to me, and it's a full 2 yards. I don't think that they're calling anything really confident with a full 2 yards.
And they just got stopped on one of their QB power with Josh Allen with a full with all their 6th offensive linemen and fullback in there. That is one of their plays.
So what's interesting is the call itself, right? The 3rd down play call, not to try and convert, but the actual play call, Josh Allen QB power. Romo was advocating for just run the push play twice right? It's 4th and 2. It's Josh Allen. This team is like the Eagles now in terms of like success rate with those QB sneak plays. Just run it twice. You'll gain a yard each time and score. And instead, they run this QB power play, and it gets stuffed for nothing. And now it's 4th and a full 2, and you're like, okay, we probably have to kick at that stage. The thing is, I mean, this happened recently again as well, right? Where they did this same thing. They went like, our best play is Josh Allen running something like QB power, and it got buried, and you're in this tough spot again. I still feel like that generally is probably their best shot of gaining 2 yards. It's just that the Ravens killed it, and it gained nothing. Yeah,
and the Ravens are one of the best teams up front against the run anyway.
But that is the interesting calculus. Like, do you risk your best play, which has got the best chance of picking up 2 yards, or do you say the push play will almost certainly gain at least 1 yard, which means we get now you have 2 plays to gain 2 yards as opposed to 1 play to gain 2 yards.
That. Honestly, the problem with the push play is like once you compress it, you're essentially saying 1 yard is all we're going to get.
Yeah.
If you can disguise it a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's like a very high chance of gaining 1 yard twice, or what you think is a pretty good chance of gaining 2 yards.
I don't hate it.
Once.
And then you're saying, Lamar, you got to go John Elway here. You got to go 98 or 99 yards. Granted, if you do get the touchdown, game's over. I mean, you're winning, right? I don't hate the field goal. I know people like to be more aggressive. I think all the analytics numbers were like a 1% difference. And again, to me, that's like,
I think kicking the field goal
if you see
fine.
1%, I see people say like, oh, we had a 1% difference, and they call that a strong go. I call that probably a rounding error. Like, I mean, the margin for error in that is so tight. I don't think 1% is that significant. My suggestion on 4th down was a jump pass.
Jump pass.
Yeah. I don't know have they run that with Allen before?
No, they probably should, though.
And if you rewatch this
Derrick
play,
Henry style jump pass.
Yes, because and I was wrong. They didn't bring in fullbacks and extra alignment. It was 6-man front. But if you run the jump pass, they had a fullback. But if you run the jump pass, if you compress it and then run the jump pass behind it, I mean, Baltimore sold out on this play. By the way, if Allen pulled it, I don't even know if this is part of the call. If he pulls it and flips it to the flat to Mac Hollins, it's a touchdown. I don't know if they've got that. Pass could get batted. I mean, there's a lot that could go wrong there.
Right.
But, by the way, that was another key play. Baltimore had a batted pass, and PFF generally never blames. Like when we were at PFF, we don't blame the quarterback for a batted pass. Batted pass on an early 2-point conversion from Baltimore, which also kind of came back to bite. When you miss on two-point conversions and lose by 2, doesn't take a math major to know that's pretty significant.
And Milano was the guy that deflected that, right? Milano had a real impact in this game. I mean, he was the guy that forced the pressure on Lamar Jackson's interception. He, I think, deflected the pass on the 2-point conversion.
He's running spy and
they had him
tackles.
It was funny because right at the start, the first drive, right, which on the one hand, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens sort of methodically marched down the field, score a touchdown. On the other hand, right at the start of that, Buffalo forced him into 3rd and 8 and had Matt Milano as a spy on Lamar Jackson, and Jackson just invalidated it anyway and beat Milano to space, picked up 3rd and 8, running the ball, and it's like, that's really difficult to do. But they had Matt Milano causing all kinds of problems as an add-on rusher. Like they had him basically playing QB spy, but also if the bank stayed in the block, Milano was just firing and adding to the blitz. It was causing all kinds of issues. He made a lot of plays with his defense, and you got to credit that Bills defense. That was a performance that I think a lot of people didn't think that they were necessarily capable of against this Baltimore offense. And again, Lamar Jackson, like, were they unforced errors or were they forced errors by Matt Milano's pressure, by DeMar Hamlin's pressure? Like, he didn't just lose the ball randomly in space, right? He was under pressure and under duress on both occasions where he made a mistake.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. Full team win. Credit Buffalo for what they did. I mean, that first drive, like you said, they bottled up Henry, and then Lamar picks up a scramble on 3rd and 8, and they had 2 wide open passes, one of which was dropped. And I'm like, this is why Baltimore is so tough to defend. And it's honestly, it's almost the same narrative as Detroit. I think Baltimore playing, beating themselves, essentially. That's it. That's like the difference in the game. That's the implosion. And that's part of the Lamar narrative. This is why it's so similar to Peyton, because the baseline's high. Because you've set a really high regular season baseline. Lamar Jackson had 4 interceptions this entire season. And did he have the lowest turnover-worthy play percentage? Like, that combo is rare. It doesn't make sense.
But the whole team as well. It's not a stat that we dive into very often here, but DVOA claims that the Baltimore Ravens of the last 2 years in the regular season are like 2 of the 6 greatest teams to ever play the game.
Yeah.
Now, I think that might be overdoing it a little bit.
Is that the second time we've ever mentioned DVOA on the show? I think
Probably.
It is.
But the point is, this team has been generally spectacular in the regular season.
And that's,
now, they've had random stinking games, which is why I think that might be overdoing it a bit. But the point is, that baseline, as you said, it's exceptionally high, and then they get to the playoffs where the other teams are also good, and it doesn't
I'll say this on the Lamar narrative stuff. I think it was more real last year in the Kansas City game.
Yes.
He was awful in that game. He was completely different from the way he played in the regular season and previous regular seasons. He was terrible in that game. In this game, to your point, it looked like it might go down that path because in the first half, 2 of these terrible plays showed up. But then he righted the wrong, but it was too late, right? So those plays still count, but the full narrative piece about like choking in the playoffs, not fully there. Last thing, though, as a QB wins are pretty real type of guy, there's something to this whole thing. Like, why is the team as a whole underachieving in the playoffs, right? And now you've got Mahomes on the other end. Mahomes has, if you look at any advanced stat over the last 2 years, Mahomes is like a fringe top 10 quarterback during the regular season. But in the playoffs, no turnovers, rarely has a bad game, plays under control. It is the complete opposite. And that's where obviously Chiefs fan Nick Wright's coming from that. But I don't know. Those are probably fair questions to ask, is how those things end up flipping in the postseason.
But this is the thing. I think I'm starting to come around to your way of thinking, which is that over time, QB wins actually might have some significant signal to it rather than just noise. But I think that that's true only within the confines of the regular season. I think when you get to the playoffs and the difficulty level, the game is now set to, all Madden mode, right, across the board. Now it starts, and the sample size gets shrunk down. So now it starts to get just wildly, you're way too subject to variance at this point. Like you're no longer at a stage where overall the baseline is low enough that the difference between QBs makes a massive, like you're now at the level where we're talking about, you take any 2 plays out of this game, move them in the column for the other team, the result changes, right? So now you're just like, and I think that's why it gets frustrating, because I think the narrative on Lamar has kind of been right in that generally he's played badly in the playoffs relative to his regular season level, right? So when you get another game like this, which simply ends in, the data points are simply another L for Lamar, and there were mistakes in there for Lamar. Those 2 things. So now we just chuck it in the bucket of another disappointing postseason playoff performance by Lamar. But I think this was very different to those other games, because when he did make those mistakes, he did not go into his shell and collapse and wilt and same old Lamar. He actually came back and bounced back. And if you're saying that doesn't count anymore because, he made the mistakes in the first place, well, now you're discounting like some of the greatest quarterback performances and stories and outcomes of all time, because so many of those had bad mistakes in it, right? Tom Brady, 28-3 down in the Super Bowl, throws a ball right to Robert Alford. The play the Edelman catch thing, right? That play went through the hands of Robert Alford, right? It should have been picked off. So one of the greatest, Brady is great moments of all time was a terrible play, but we don't care because the outcome was good, right? This is what drives me nuts
everything
about that.
Everything after that was good, too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. So everything after that for Lamar was good, but we don't care because Mark Andrews dropped the ball. This is what drives me nuts about this, and this is why I think in the postseason, QB wins are not going to get you there. I think it's actually because it's just too. I
mean, still over time,
it's too small a sample size. Yeah. The plays are too randomly influenced and variable in that, and it's a team thing, right? So I like Peyton Manning's postseason failure, Tom Brady's postseason success. Was it Peyton is not as good as Tom Brady, or was it Belichick defense, blah blah blah? Like everything else becomes magnified and more important. So Baltimore as a team have underachieved in the playoffs. Now, up until now, Lamar has probably been the chief problem, generally. This game, it wasn't, though. He was a problem. He turned the ball over twice. But was he the chief problem? Or if Mark Andrews was Isaiah Likely for all those targets, do Baltimore win this game and they're in the AFC Championship game?
Yeah. I get it, man. I think the other tricky part is, like, you'll always, like, the career stats are never going to be undone in one or two good games. So, it's easy to say, well, here are the career playoff stats still for Lamar, right? You can't undo them with, like, a couple touchdowns, right? You need to have, like, a 7-touchdown game to, like, flip the career playoff stats, right?
Right.
And you're not going to do that in one game. It's going to take multiple seasons. Anyway, Lamar's still young, probably a 3-time MVP. The Peyton Manning comparison, though, is probably going to be the closest one, right? Is the perhaps best regular season quarterback during a stretch that was unable to do it in the playoffs.
I mean, at the moment, he's more in the Dan Marino or John Elway bucket of, like, there's been no postseason success.
No, I know, but this was Peyton through 8 years of his career, basically, for a while.
Till he won one?
Yeah. On a 3-touchdown, 7-interception run, 4-game run when the run defense showed up, right? I mean, it's the funny part about what?
Just Peyton Manning erasure over here.
I'm just telling you, that's what happened. He was awful on that run. So there you go. You're talking about the narrative stuff and getting the truth behind it. That's the truth behind everything. Anyway.
He downed the greatness of Rex Grossman in the Super Bowl, and you want to try and undo all that.
Peyton was awesome, man. Anyway, good show. We did it in under 2.5 hours.
Simple.
4 games.
Easy.
So I feel like we left a lot out. What else did we miss? Did we miss anything? Chat? Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Might be our last 7 a.m. I think next week we might go live. Right after conference championship.
Live?
Instead of instant reaction, maybe a full show, instant reaction after the Chiefs-Bills game. Looking forward to next week.
Because we got to get to the Senior Bowl.
Got to get to the Senior Bowl.
Where we will hopefully be doing some more behind-the-scenes video content. If you are just a listener or if you just watch the live shows, go and find the behind-the-scenes video we did on YouTube from our circuit trip. Because
feedback's been great on it. A lot of good feedback, and we appreciate that. A lot of people liked seeing our little behind-the-scenes.
Yeah, it's our first kind of dabble with the behind-the-scenes content, and we want to know if we should keep doing this. Right at the moment, the feedback has been very positive within the video, but not that many people have watched it. So if you haven't seen it, go give it a look and let us know what you think.
Go check it out. We also dropped a first mock draft. Just flew through a mock draft just to get some of that out there, get the draft discussion going. I'm going to have Jim Nagy this week. We're going to pre-record something for next week to preview the Senior Bowl, really start to get into draft mode as the season winds down here. And Wednesday, we're going to did you agree that Wednesday we could do the award show? Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. Wednesday award show. Check the mic. First annual. Check the mic. Season-ending awards. We're going to maybe even get dressed up. Bring some awards to the table this Wednesday.
Nice.
All right. Well, appreciate everybody tuning in on a Monday morning, and we had no instant reaction tonight. Enjoy the national championship game. We will not instantly react to that, but we will be back on Wednesday with more. Check the mic.